Well, welcome to the halfway show, just over the halfway point in the month of August 2023. My name's George Brauchler. This is the George Show at 710 KNUS. I take the baton from Hugh Hewitt and I'll carry it all the way until 10 o'clock when I'll hand it off to Charlie Kirk. I was just commenting to Billy, and we'll talk about something that came up on Charlie's show yesterday. I listened to it live and then I listened to it again on the podcast because I wanted to make sure I understood what he was saying. But at one point, dude says, and I think he's talking about the era in which he grew up, and he's like, I was born in 1993, and I didn't hear anything for about 15 seconds after that because I was yelling the F word at the radio. Like, why would anyone listen to you, dude? I mean, you've been around for 30 years. I mean, I don't know what you have to offer, and I'm sort of kidding. If you're a young person listening, but I mean, come on. But nonetheless, Charlie Kirk from 10 to 11, then Big Dennis Prager from 11 to 1. Dennis is coming to town, folks. He is going to be here later on this month, second day to the end of the month, August the 30th, right here within striking distance of probably where you're listening. Best guess, you can drive to the View House right off of I-25 and Centennial very, very quickly. He's going to be there for the third annual Dennis Prager Cigar Night. I'll be there. Stefan will be there. Alexa texted me last night and said, hey, Stefan's back on the air. And I said, Stefan who? No, I'm kidding. Stefan was out. I think he was dealing with, I can't remember what he said, Billy, if it was COVID or the drips or whatever. I can't
Leprosy
remember.
Leprosy
or something. We're just glad he's better now.
Yeah.
And after I say all those things, I realize I'm sitting in the chair he was in and my skin is itching.
You didn't even disinfect that thing at all. I was like,
we used to.
Yeah. There used to be some spray in there.
Yeah.
During the COVID.
Spray in there. And by
I
the
have
way,
some spray over here.
The person that designed this studio is someone who's never had to use the studio.
No, they actually, I think they hate radio hosts because of how it is designed. There's some very weird quirks inside of that studio.
It's the same thing with courtrooms. The people that design courtrooms don't ever use courtrooms. It's just how they imagine courtrooms should be
exactly
in whatever world they picture. This is the same thing. Whoever put this studio together is someone who's like, if I can close my eyes long enough, I can picture being a radio host. And I think I would want blank. It's like
what did that studio look like in the show Frasier? What was that? Because that was totally unrealistic.
This is very Frasier-like without all the extra space.
Exactly. With no space at all. Yeah.
Everything's on top of each other.
And at my other job, I have another instance of that happening where the wonderful and talented engineers, super smart people, were redesigning the basic platform that we use. And when they did it, it was obvious that they took maybe, I would say in the meetings, probably 90 seconds thinking about how we were actually going to use it. Because it does not do things that are very friendly to the actual operator. And we came back afterwards and like, well, why does it do this? And they said, well, because it works better for us.
Yeah, kind of irrelevant.
I don't. Okay, this doesn't help though. But I can't make it do this and this and this. And they go, well, okay. What do you want? I'm like, fix it? Like, no.
This is a lot like putting Denverites in charge of the Department of Transportation. Because they don't drive to begin with. I really don't care what their theories are on quote unquote transit.
Exactly.
And yet here we are.
Yeah. It's exactly the philosophy of, ooh, I have an idea. If we make the trains free, people will realize they're great and then want to pay for them.
They want to drive to them.
No. Once you give something to someone for free, they're never going to want to pay for it.
Yeah, it's the whole cow, the milk thing.
Exactly. Like, why would you do that? You morons. Oh, well.
But
there's a good reason
it's also a lot like putting a vegan in charge of the In-N-Out menu.
Yes,
they're not going to care about, they're not going to care about the quality of the burgers because they're not going to eat it anyway.
No, not at all. But again, it's, and you do have to poke fun at the vegans because it's odd that they always try to make their food taste like our food. I'm just saying, if your food was so good, you wouldn't be making the fake meat.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, if it was so
that's
fantastic,
right. You wouldn't need to try to copy the real
not
thing.
at all. Yeah, that wouldn't be a deal.
Although we were watching this Game Changers documentary thing, and it's making the case for how all these great athletes survive on like a meat-free, vegetarian, maybe vegan diet or something. And
my guess would be there has to be supplements in there because there's going to have to be protein.
I imagine there has to be supplements. But and the protein comes from, of course, the tofu or something. I don't know, lentils. or something.
Oh, goody, more beans.
I
That's
just
fantastic.
can't believe I need a scientist to tell me, a food scientist, that there's as much protein in a pound of tofu as in a pound of steak. By the way, couldn't eat a pound of tofu in a year. I mean, there's just no way to put it in your body because I'd reject it. My body would naturally want to throw it up, or undigested, just put it out.
The other part is this is, I mean, no offense, but I honestly think that I appreciate the vegans and the vegetarians. I appreciate what you're doing. And I agree. I understand that raising meat is inefficient and takes a lot of resources.
Meat's murder.
Blah, blah,
Just
blah.
saying.
Yes, I get it. But however, the man upstairs, the guy that we follow up there, well, or woman, depending on what you think, but
it's
still,
a guy. Yeah, it's totally a dude. That's what all the paintings say.
He made the little animals delicious.
He did make them delicious.
He could have made
and
it
gave us fire to make them deliciouser.
And so, I mean, he could have in his grand scheme, he is omniscient and omnipotent.
Yeah, true.
He could have made it so that they tasted like soap, but no. He made them delicious.
I don't want to go too far down this road because he's also created a whole bunch of other temptations that you don't want to pursue either, because that would be bad.
That is true.
He's made a lot of other things physically delicious that you're like, don't do that. You shouldn't do that.
Still, though, I think that if the message was that we all should be eating the plants and the beans, then the animals wouldn't be as tasty. So I believe that it is a higher calling in us for us to follow, the carnivore lifestyle.
I thought maybe I try it. Maybe I spend a month trying it, and I don't know. Listen, every time I feel shorts that fit a whole lot better before I took over this show, like straining, like the little string around the gathered short, like I'm wearing them now.
Yeah.
There used to be so much string. I mean, there was so much I could make 2 bows or 3 bows.
Exactly.
Now I'm like, did the string shrink?
Yes.
What happened to the string?
Did I wash this in hot water? What happened?
Like repeatedly for a month, because it looks like these things got super small.
Oh yeah.
These are built for a Ken doll.
I did that the other day. I put on a t-shirt I hadn't worn in a while. I'm like, oh man, this t-shirt makes me look fat. And I thought about it. No. It's my big tummy. It has nothing to do with the shirt, not the shirt's fault. Stop blaming the clothes. It is my eating habits and lack of exercise at this point in my life. And that's because of the schedule. I know. So
I don't know. Listen, for weather-wise, by the way, before we leave here, the weather, they've taken away one of the lightning bolts days. It was going to be Friday. They've replaced it with mostly sunny in the 90s throughout everything I can see on this Channel 7 pictogram. But lightning bolts on Saturday and Sunday. Few PM storms. I guess that's good or bad. I was hoping that it would be during the period of time that I'm supposed to run 12 miles, so I could be like, darn weather.
Shoot. Curse you.
Guess I'll stay under this shelter for the rest of the day. Rats.
And make
God doesn't want me to run this thing.
Yeah, and make myself feel better with this delicious margarita.
A couple things, updates. First off, the move, some folks have texted in, including Alexa, about this.
Yeah.
The move, I think, is going well. The feedback I've gotten has been good, but it's not over. It's like the orientation process. And you pointed this out. You get like an hour to move in. And so I'm glad T and I went up there on Saturday to get the kind of the lay of the land, but it was more than that. I mean, I got a chance to move in a little fridge and the microwave that we went and all that. That was so helpful. Then I guess it turns into chaos now, because now everybody has 1 hour to get themselves situated. I know you and your boy are going to be dealing with that tomorrow. So they started that process yesterday. I just thought it was funny that at one point Amanda and Mom are up there doing their thing in the room, and Jeff and I were driving around. He had a driving class yesterday and said, hey, let's just call Trey and see how it's going. We called Trey, and I'm like, where are you, man? And he's like, just kind of tooling around the campus, getting the lay of the land. I'm like, well, where are Mom and Amanda?
Nice.
And he's like, they're in the room, making it nice and stuff. And I'm like, I see how this went. You know what I mean? The room isn't huge, and here's these two type A personalities going after the room. And I imagine Trey just kind of silently wheeled out of there, like, no.
He's like,
and the door quietly closes.
Homer Simpson going back into the bushes.
Yeah, that's right. He's melding back into the bushes. Very Field of Dreams like at the end, and then just kind of took off for around the campus. I'll see you guys in a bit. And I'm like, that's a smart kid.
We did that. It was last year. Same thing happened. Is Spencer is up there, and Mom and I are there, and we're going through. We've gotten the room unloaded, and now Mom wants to make the bed and do the other stuff, and he's like, "But Mom, I can do this later. I can." And I'm like, "Here, let's go make sure the car is parked right and lock the doors. And we start walking down the hallway, and I'm like, just let her do this. I'm like, and he's like, but I'm like, no.
Oh, yeah.
I go, have you met your mother?
Yeah.
Yeah. I go, this is her nesting, and this is her setting up the nest for her little boy. And so this makes her feel good. I'm like, let her do it.
Yeah.
And he's like,
yeah.
well, I feel bad that she's doing it. I'm like, no. This is a fulfillment for her. So let her do it.
This is a win.
Yeah.
So we have that. We have the orientation. I can't remember. Maybe orientation is tomorrow, and today is just further nest feathering, and I can't remember. But I've got, yesterday I drove back and forth between the house and the school so many times. It made my tum-tum hurt.
Yeah.
Graham has cross country, and then Jeff's got to be driven to some drive safe something or other. They should be advertisers on here, by the way, because they have a pretty booming business.
They do. And they do a good job. I got to say, I mean, shout out to them based on
That's what I've heard.
Based on price points and instruction. I think it is a value for your money. There's some other ones that are more expensive that do come some extra stuff. But if you're looking for something that does quality, that's going to fit inside the family budget, they do a really good job.
I mentioned that Jeff is the most conservative, almost to the point of annoying for anyone who's been driving for as many years as we have.
That's our oldest
driver.
Yeah.
And I go to pick him up at 7. In between, by the way, I got to take Graham home, and then I got to go to back to school night. I mean, this is like the one dude running the show kind of thing down here.
Yeah.
And
Fort Collins.
Up with Amanda. Like, there are no other drivers. 3 of our drivers are in Fort Collins. Like, it's just me for now. So we got to get Jeff armed with a license. Anyway, I go to pick him up at 7 or whatever. And the guy, super nice guy, Justin, there is like, hey, here's the sheet. Here's some things for him. I said, first off, did you get expelled, from driving school? And he's like, no. And the guy goes, no, Jeff did a really good job. There's just a couple things for him to work on. And I said, forgive me, man. Like what? And he goes, well, right here. And I see the box checked by stop sign. And I said, listen, man, I don't know if the wheels came off the bus when Jeff was with you, but Jeff stops so long at a stop sign. I wonder if he's seeing an accident somewhere. Like, I've looked around like, what happened?
Yeah.
Where did we go? Because he's like, Dad, I'm coming to a complete stop. I'm like, complete stop isn't defined as 3 seconds of motionless. You know what I mean? And so he goes, no, it wasn't that at all. And Jeff's like, yeah, it wasn't that I didn't stop long enough. It's that I have to stop before a certain unmarked line.
Yep.
So now get this. So I'm driving. Yeah. We're leaving there. And he goes, see, you're on the unmarked line. I said, how do you know it's unmarked?
Exactly.
He's like, because you can see there's a divot in the thing. I'm like, that's a divoted line. That's not an unmarked line. Like, why are you so comfortable correcting your dad's driving? I've been doing this forever.
Exactly.
And then the other one that he got dinged on was hand placement on the wheel.
What?
I said, 10 and 2? I said, come on, man. He goes, no, it's not that. It's that when I'm turning, I do this thing with my hands where I blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, just let the wheel naturally spin back, with your hands. He goes, no, you can't do that.
You can't do that
because you're letting go of the wheel. I said, I'm not letting go of the wheel. There's friction between my skin and the wheel. I am in control. He's like, Dad, you can't do that. I'm like, hey, rule follower. I've been doing this for decades, man. I know exactly what I'm doing. I know. The whole ride home was, Dad, you're exceeding the speed limit. And I'm like, what? This damn school.
You want to see how fast I can go?
Like, come on. I'm driving a hybrid, son. It's not a Lamborghini.
and that there is that real thing that they say on hand placement is you can't do the little, like
that's
wax
what
on,
I
wax
do.
off.
Yeah, wax on, wax off.
When you're turning, you can't do that. It has to be a hand over hand. And you have to do the same thing coming back because we were taught to just relax a little bit and let that spin back to natural center. But no,
that's right.
Yeah,
Why
do that
can't
anymore.
you do that?
Because
what's unsafe about that?
If in case the tires or something hit something, etc. Again,
sweet God, in the middle of your turn,
exactly. That somehow the tires are going to change, etc. And you don't have full control of the wheel. And
so he's telling me the stupid. 2 hands thing, and I said, "What do you do if John Tesh comes on the radio and you're driving?" I'm like, "You're going to take a hand off to change the radio station. You have to, or you're going to get in an accident."
Yep.
Then the other one I said is, "Hey, let's pretend your blinkers go out and you want to change lanes from the lane you're into the one on the left. What are you doing with your extra hand, buddy?"
What do you do?
And he's, like, we're having a full-on debate. And he's like, I guess you'd stick it out the window. I said, that's right. And now you're not touching the wheel. He goes, but you have one hand fully on the wheel. And I'm like, shut up.
Yeah, that's the same thing what you were talking about.
You are grounded. Just as soon as you learn to drive, I will never ground you from driving because I need you to be able to drive, Graham. But
until then.
Yeah, that's right.
I do that a lot when I'm teaching the kids to drive is I have a lot of, on the test, you have to do this. But in reality, this. So we practice, and especially that stop sign thing. They are legit about that. So I get on the kids and I'm like, okay, here's where you need to stop in order to pass the test. But nobody else is going to.
Yeah, nobody does that.
Exactly. So
I said, Jeff, do you leave open the possibility that your adherence to the rules makes you unsafe on the road? And he's like, no, just because everybody else isn't doing it. I'm like, no, it's because nobody else is doing it.
Yeah.
If you drive 65 miles an hour to the mile on the highway, you will create car accidents somewhere. I'm just telling you, there's no way to get around it.
Yeah. And I've talked to the kids about the difficult thing about learning to drive is you cannot virtually replicate it. There is no other skill that you can do and practice anywhere else that will teach you how to necessarily drive, because you have to get used to how fast things come at you. You have to look at the speed difference, and you have to look at how quickly some of the other cars in the other lanes are coming at you. It's like the stupid Gran Turismo movie. I understand.
I was about to bring up Gran Turismo.
I know. Based on a true story. Sure. The video game kid. However, the video game kid already knew how to drive. It wasn't like they were like, hey,
this is how
you've
you
never
drive,
driven before. Let's put you on the track. That's not what happened. Then so the idea that I could play a video game and learn how to be a race car driver. No. You've got to learn how to drive first. Then the video game can teach you some of the skills, and then you can apply those when you're out on I-25 or on the raceway. I'm just saying.
So here's other folks chiming in. Sad part is that with the hand-over-hand action, it's going to guarantee a collision by keeping one hand on the side. Friction changing the direction of the wheel in a smoother, more control fashion allows for more turning. All you need to do is get crossed up in a series of extra turns left, right, with your hands back and forth. I agree, but
yes, 110%.
They're not the ones grading him.
Yes, crossing over. I think that is stupid. The fact that you're crossing one hand over the other is dumb. Absolutely stupid.
And in sports, you're told not to do that with your feet, right? Like that's when, especially like in basketball or soccer, that's when you make your move because dude can't respond, right?
Exactly.
So the other thing he says, we're driving by STEM because this drive safe thing is over by STEM. Yeah. And he says, hey, Dad, I want to know something about STEM. And I'm like, I know a whole lot about STEM. And he goes,
oddly enough,
the school speed limit's enforced all the time. Even they're not in school all the time. And that's important because if you exceed the school speed limit by more than a mile over whatever it is, you get dinged a point. I said, oh, how many points can you lose? He said, you can have either 20 or something small infractions or something. I can't remember what it is.
That seems like a lot.
Or if you have a major. I'm like, what's a major? How many are there? He goes, there's 4 majors. I said, well, what are the 4 major infractions? And maybe 20 is too high, and he said, one is if the instructor has to hit the brake. One is if the instructor has to grab the wheel. And now I'm thinking, what are you doing? If the instructor's like, oh my God. And then one is if you cause an accident. And the other is if you are in an accident, that's your fault. And I'm like,
that seems reasonable.
I want to interview Justin, the drive guy on here and say, dude, I need to hear your stories. I mean, like, what's the craziest thing you've ever done? And I'm like, Jeff, can you imagine? I said, first I counted 3. And he goes, no. The brake is separate from grabbing the wheel. I'm like, so you could get more than one. Like I could envision a dude hitting the brake, grabbing the wheel, and you're involved in an accident. That's 3 out of 4. I said, how many before you fail? He goes, if you have 1 major, you're out. And I'm like, we need, Billy, this may be a thing. We need to get some state driving instructor or so. We need to get somebody, maybe Drive Safe, to come on and tell us about worse things they've seen behind the wheel.
Oh, see, when Katie was learning to drive and she had to drive safe as well, they would come back and say, she's a really good driver. She's this. I'm like, what? Her? Again, it's because my wonderful daughter, one of the very first times that we are driving around in a parking lot, she manages to hit a park bench. No. 1, they don't move. 2,
well,
the park bench was not in the parking lot. She had to clear the curb and several feet of grass
in order
to get there. Yes.
Oh, dude. I wish you had that break.
Oh, yeah, I did. I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, I don't know. I'm like, it's obvious.
I find myself being such a horrible parent with Jeff because you have a sense of how the lights are working and when they're going to change.
Absolutely.
Especially in the areas you drive around a lot. So I can see there's one particular light that it is a B to turn left on, right? To get onto this road, the light changes every day once or something. And you see it's green. And you know that if you're driving, you're going to make the left turn. And I'm doing gestures with my hands like, Jeff, I'm flicking them for. I'm like, come on, get there, faster. Jeff, get there. He's like, Dad, Dad. And then I'm like, buddy, you've got to hit this light. And he's like, well, okay, I'm trying. And I'm like, put your foot on the gas, man. And he's like, my foot is on the gas. And then all of a sudden it changes. And I'm like, you better make this light. And then I can tell turning on a yellow for him is like crossing the streams. You know what I mean? Like he feels like he has murdered someone.
Yeah.
And he's like, Dad. And I'm like, Jeff. I'm like, and then we clear the turn and I'm like, I am relieved because we've just saved 5 minutes of our collective lives.
Yeah.
And I can see he's just completely stressed. And I'm like, son, listen, I want you to be a safe driver.
Yeah.
I want you to follow the rules to the letter of the law, mostly when Dad's not in the car, because I can't take the pace that we're setting. Like, I think to myself, we have 14 minutes to pick up Graham before we have to go to blank. Halfway through the drive, I see Google I just check.
Yeah.
I'm like, Google's adding minutes, Jeff. It thinks you're driving slower than you should. Google thinks you're driving slower than you should.
Now,
come on.
My oldest, Max, and he's the one that has the brain injury, and he is a wonderful driver, but he follows all the rules as well.
Oh, good.
That's his life. And so he is the safest driver on the road, which is wonderful because we got the little State Farm Drive Safe and Save. And so he pays almost nothing for car insurance, which is fantastic and good for him. But if we're going somewhere, I have to add an extra 5 to 8 minutes minimum because he's driving, just because. And that's just how it works. And I love that about him. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
But you just got to know that when he's driving, it's just going to take a little bit longer. And that's okay. And then when I drive, he's sitting there. He's like, oh, gosh. And then, of course, my wife, and this is one of the reasons I fell in love with her, is when my wife drives, how do I put this delicately? It's almost as if she thinks she is qualifying for the Daytona 500. In fact,
that's a little different than your son.
Yeah, completely. And in fact, I nickname her Angela Andretti because of that. And so there are times, and I make sounds sometimes when we're driving and she's going really fast. She'll take a turn sharp and I'll go, makes screeching noises, and then she'll come up and she's going a little fast. She'll come up to a stop sign or something, or stoplight, and she pushes the brake on a little harder, and I will dramatically fling myself against the dashboard and go, oh my God, my head. And she's like, stop it. Will you stop that? But I tease her all the time. But again, that was one of the reasons that I was attracted to her and we were dating originally, because I'm like, oh, you know how to drive. I appreciate this because I try not to, but I do have a bit of a lead foot as well. And history proves me out, because you're talking about driving and points and things like that. Yeah, I lost my license before I was 18.
What?
Yeah. No, I know.
That takes just a little bit of effort. Not a lot of effort. A little
takes a little bit of effort. A little bit of effort. And I exceeded expectations.
Oh, so, good for you.
Yeah, that was a problem.
How long did you lose it for?
About 9 months is what I lost it for.
9 months.
Yeah,
you can make a baby in that.
Yeah, I know.
That's something.
That was tough. That was a nice learning lesson. And I still to this day apologize to my parents for doing that, because it was awful.
Well,
I was an idiot. I should not have been allowed. At 16, you should.
But the right to vote should be yours.
Yeah, exactly.
And the right to change your gender.
Yeah, there's no.
But not driving.
Yeah, there's no way. I've seen that Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards. I know the bad decisions they make. No.
My dad would tell stories of how the PE teacher was the driving instructor guy.
Oh, wow.
And that he'd get in the car, super stern dude, football guy.
Yeah. And was he wearing the polyester bike shorts?
I got to ask him if that was the thing back in the day, because, you're talking 50s, 60s,
Yeah, maybe they didn't around there yet.
He said guy would put a full cup of coffee on the dashboard and say, if you spill this, you fail.
Ouch.
And so that's how my dad was like driving. I'm like,
ouch.
Yeah, I don't think I could make it 10 feet if we didn't have a really robust cup holder.
Yeah.
And even then it's questionable.
Yeah,
I need a lid.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I need something absorbent nearby just in case.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, we've seen about the absorbent thing.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, let's do something here. Yes.
No, there's YouTube.
Yes, let's go to the YouTube. We're going to go to the YouTube. Here it is.
Well, folks, I just stood up to grab the little headphone things here and dumped a little bit of something called a Celsius. It's a delicious kiwi guava right on my nether region. So I'm going to mop that off while the big man takes us through the Thorpe Report.
Now the question is, which picture do we want to watch?
It's all. If you're on the Rumble or the YouTube right now, it's me just patting down that area that you really normally have to pay for someone to pat down. I feel like I've wet myself. I'm just going to say it out loud. The seat here, of course, is cushiony enough that it's absorbed much of the kiwi guava I'm not sure how that's going to taste because I'm not putting my mouth there, but why that came into my mind.
I love that.
We're going to come back. We're going to do the You Choose the News, and I'm going to try to find something absorbent.
That's why we are friends.
So Mark Crowley, our IT wizard, has now taken to saying, you know what? I can make these things called YouTube Shorts, no pun intended. And now he's done 2 of them. He did one with Screamin' Diane.
Yeah.
Do you remember that one?
There was 3 though. Screamin' Diane, and then he did the abortion thing.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, the abortion
we do have
one.
3 now.
Yeah, yep, exactly.
So listen, you can watch us on the YouTube and the Rumble. We're on. You just search for 710 KNUS or the George Show. You can get us that way. And now we're doing these shorts, and we're supposed to be sitting here on the show jibber jabbering, and then like when we say something we think is short worthy, we're supposed to like. I don't know.
Well, see, the thing is, it's my responsibility to figure out those times. The problem is my filter. Not the same as the rest of the company.
And I'm not sure I want you checking out my shorts. I'm not sure I like the idea of you getting into that business. Yeah, I don't think that's the way radio's supposed to go. Listen, we have crossed over the
we're not
30
doing the full
mark.
body tick check during this one.
No. Let's wait until something else changes.
Okay, good.
You know what I mean? Like,
appreciate that.
And it concerns me too because I don't get the video up on my screen anymore because I found myself looking at it and making adjustments to it as a huge distraction. So instead, I'm doing stuff like I just reached down and adjusted myself, let's say.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, and I completely forget that that's on video. And then there are times where I think and I hope we're in a break where I'm like, I wonder what that could be in my nose, or something like that. Like, is that a ring?
What just fell off of me?
And then I think if Lewis isn't manning the camera in the right way, this is a career-killing thing. Can't run for office anymore because the campaign signs for my opponent are picking a winner.
This is also there's also a reminder we cannot forget Lewis's birthday. Otherwise, bad things will happen.
That's right.
Yes,
Lewis, just make a list of the things you like best and pass it along.
Just
to
you can
Kelly,
register like an Amazon. Just give us a list.
We're approaching.
Yeah, we should step aside.
A period of time in this show every morning where it is Seinfeld. It's a show about nothing. It is really, there's absolutely no structure to it and increasingly no limits to it either, which I think is why this part of the show will be jettisoned by our new sales guy who comes on board to say, that's the part of the show we could do with less of. And that's frankly my favorite part of the show. Actually, my favorite parts of the show are right in front of us. It's called the Thorpe Report, followed by You Choose the News. You'll stick around. You get both of them. It's George Brauchler on the George Show, 710 KNUS.
Imagine the lifelong impact of a journey to the Holy Land, surrounded by like-minded travelers. Picture yourself stepping foot in iconic locations right out of history. With nationally syndicated radio hosts Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher, you'll gain firsthand understanding of the spiritual and political importance of this vital region.
Hi, it's Mike Gallagher here. I hope you'll join Dennis Prager and me on an amazing journey through Israel in October 2023.
Discover Israel's vibrant culture and why this nation is such a strategic partner for the United States. Join Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher on this life-enriching Israel tour, October 25th through November 3rd, 2023. For more information, call 855-565-5519 or visit standwithisraeltour.com.
is a desperate last-ditch effort by a corrupt machine.
Here, before I turn it over to Billy, just a couple of quick texts. Our friend Janet says, the Bible had us vegetarians before the flood, and then God said it was okay to eat animals after the flood. What a great understanding of the Bible. I love that. And then someone says, I used to be a cop in South Dakota. There, you can get your license at, wait for it, 14 years and 9 months.
Woo.
Oh, buddy. And I said, I bet you nobody complains out in South Dakota.
Yeah.
Because if everything goes wrong and you run over someone, you've reduced the population by 10%.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And
that's interesting. And I'm focusing on the conversation about the Bible and the flood because I'm brought immediately back to the comedy stylings of Eddie Izzard. And he's talked about the idea of the flood and Noah. And he said, he goes, the reason he has questions about the story is because when they land, he goes, all the animals get off the boat. Yeah. And he said, it should have been just, okay, here come the animals. There are the lions, there are the tigers, and what happened to everything else? He's like, literally, you put those inside that's kind of a small area with all the other prey animals. Goes, they're eating everything. 40 days? He goes, they're eating everything. He's like,
the only thing coming off the boat are including Noah's gone.
Yes,
right? Noah's gone. He was a snack.
It. Yeah. Because the only things should be coming off that are the tigers and the lions. That's it.
That's brilliant observation. Let's do this right now, though. Let's kick it off with the important, factual, honest, and hopefully uplifting news of the day with the Thorpe Report.
Like I used to important. We'll pretend. All right. Today brings temperatures into the mid-90s, a touch above average this time of year in the metro. We could even get an isolated shower or two this afternoon and this evening. Start that around 2 p.m. This week front is going to briefly drop our temperatures a few degrees for Thursday before we get storms returning for Friday and Saturday. The storms are going to stay mainly in the mountains. Looks like Friday may be the hottest day of the upcoming stretch. Highs right around 95 or even 98. Then the monsoon weather will come back in through the weekend, and it's going to have kind of a prolonged hot and dry stretch and a little bit of rain through Tuesday. Denver is on track to see a record number of fatal overdoses this year. There have been 187 fatal fentanyl overdoses the first 8 months of 2023. Last year's total was 244.
Good Lord.
Yeah, those numbers translate for need greater care. Denver Health has responded by expanding their 24/7 methadone treatment program and changing the way medical staff use medications to treat patients. Elsewhere, a family of an Aurora man who was murdered at a gas station earlier this month is speaking out. They are asking the Aurora Police Department to do more to bring the shooter to justice. Reverend Dr. Silva is fighting for justice for his 27-year-old nephew. Kiris Silva, 27, father of two, shot and killed outside the Conoco gas station on 32nd and Peoria on August 5th.
Hold on, that's Aurora PD?
Yeah, Aurora PD.
Well, listen, we're going to be having Chief Art Acevedo in studio here at the 7 o'clock hour. If he's listening or Joe's listening, maybe prime the pump, man. We can have a conversation.
The Douglas County Sheriff's Office has issued a warning about fraud trend after 3 incidents. They're saying they've received 3 separate reports in July of suspects meeting a victim in person to receive money and other valuables as a scam that starts with an error message on your computer screen and tablet. It says you need to contact this phone number for support. When they contact the phone number, it's actually the suspects, and then they give them lots of money, and of course they run away with it. One victim lost $125,000, which is ridiculous. All the victims, though, unfortunately, have been in their 70s. And that's part of it, is not understanding the technology.
Listen, I love in my mind the story of some 70-year-olds banding together and luring these bloodsuckers into a place where they then take revenge on them.
Yeah.
Like Cocoon meets Goodfellas.
Oh, my oldest son was over at my mom's house, and he caught her in the middle of being scammed. And it was one of those things that had popped up on the computer screen. And it's like, oh, you need to contact her. And he's in another room. And she says, well, and he hears her say, well, I don't understand why you need my bank number, but okay, it's going. And so she goes, give me a second to look. And he runs and he's like, no. And she's like, no, I need to. And he goes over and unplugs the computer. And she's like, what did you do? And he's like, no, you have to understand what they were doing. And we talked about it to her later. And she's like, oh, she had no idea. Because again, she's not assuming that someone that's going to do that is going to be an asshat and do that. That's my word of the day.
I want to see these victims seek revenge on their much younger bastard-like scammers. While we're telling the story, I've watched a spider rappel at a really uncomfortably fast pace from the ceiling, drop down on the computer in front of me, and then climb right back up at a speed that I'm now concerned when I lose sight of it in our 1970s, roofing here. Ceiling stuff, it's going to crawl over and do the same thing to me.
Oh, it could.
So you are going to, at some point, folks, in the middle of an interview, you're going to hear me go,
Spiders are mostly harmless. Don't worry about them.
What?
Yes, I have.
Buddy, they're spiders.
Who cares? They're not.
What do you mean? Who cares? I care. People care about spiders.
I play with spiders.
Yeah. Okay. Listen, that's a whole nother thing. You also play with your snake.
I know, but the wolf spiders.
And I've told you before, you're gonna go blind.
I appreciate that. Yeah. In fact, I did not know it at the time, but I scarred one of our children because I was showing them how you can tempt wolf spiders and how they respond.
Tempt?
Yeah.
Tempt the spiders?
Yeah, and how they respond to stimulus on the web. And he's
want to stimulate spiders.
He's like,
and
Dad,
tempt
that
them.
Freaked me out. I'm like, I'm sorry. I thought I was helping
you. Your word
you.
choice alone is uncomfortable.
Yes, it is.
I'm tempting and I am enticing the spiders. I play with them. I mean, good Lord, buddy.
I do.
Let's get back to crime.
Yeah, let's get back to crime. Now, this is unfortunate. Going back to school is only possible if there's a teacher. People are finding that out in Jeffco and Douglas County schools. Preschool classes at one school have been canceled so far. And Douglas County Schools is having some teacher shortages as well. Also, Aurora City Council voted on Monday night. They officially opposed the campaign to change the city's form of government into the strong mayor system.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, which is really, really good.
I thought this was going to go to a vote of the people. Did they choose not to put it on the ballot or something?
No, they chose not to endorse it. So they said that they were dealing with the initiative, which if approved by voters. So voters get a chance, but they were just expressing their distaste for it. Yeah. They also don't like selling doggies and kitties in pet stores because they banned that on Monday.
Let me make sure I've got this right. The city council, who would be further emasculated by a strong mayor, voted against the emasculation.
Yes, exactly.
No, I didn't see that coming.
I didn't either. And the 4-day work week is having a moment. Colorado law enforcement, counties, and other businesses are making a switch. And now Metro Caring It's a choice model food pantry, and they're now going to a 4-day work week, which I think is interesting.
Who is?
Metro Caring. It's basically a food pantry. They give out about 12,000 pounds of food each day. So I just think it's interesting. I just want to mention when the companies are going to a 4-day work week, because I'm hoping that maybe the powers that be are listening and maybe only do this 4 days a week.
feel like we could
use
do
a lot of
that.
sleep. Yeah.
I've told the horror story before. We could do an extra show and put it in the can.
Yeah.
No euphemism.
No, you can't.
But the one time we tried it, it completely failed.
Yeah.
It was
Total backfire.
it was the Marshall fires.
Yeah.
And instead, I'm interviewing a couple sheriffs about just stuff.
Yeah, stuff. Even though things are on fire at the time. And speaking
well.
of dumb things people do, the Thrill of Black Bear Pass in San Juan Mountains attracts adventurous drivers every year. But my favorite sheriff's department frequently refers to the people driving up there right now as ass clowns. That's why it's my word of the day. The OHV route between U.S. Highway 550 and Telluride slowly leads drivers up the summit of Red Mountain Pass. It is currently closed, but as a couple of four-wheel drivers thought on Monday, no, rules do not apply to us. And, of course, they got stuck, and I appreciate the rescue people that got them out of there. But more importantly, I appreciate the Sheriff's Department referring to them in a public tweet as ass clowns. Nice job. I salute you. Alrighty.
Is that defined anywhere in a dictionary or manual?
I imagine it has to be, but
Because it feels like
who
it's
knows?
just sort of, I know it when I see it. It's like
Yeah.
pornography, right?
Yeah.
Hard to define.
But
Ass clown, hard to define.
yeah, I'm worried about it because I have a feeling that if I went and searched it online, I'm going to find a giant picture of myself next to the definition. Just saying. All right, that's all I got.
You run us up against it. Let's
Yes.
cut away for a break. Come back. Get the most produced, most interactive part of the show. That's called You Choose the News. Stick around. George Brauchler on The George Show. You're listening to 710 Canoe. Dr. Feelgood right here on 710 KNUS. George Brauchler on the George Show, turning it over for what time we have left to the big man. It's William with You Choose the News.
Yes, we will make this one quick. It is time for everybody's favorite fake radio news game show, You Choose the News. Yes, we have scoured the interwebs. You know how this goes. Blah, blah, blah. Funny headlines. Silly game. Nobody knows we're doing this. Alrighty. Here we go, sir. Here are our headlines this morning. Headline number 1. The law is only a suggestion at this point. Headline number 2. Another dangerous Chinese export. Headline number 3. No superpowers, but the next best thing. Headline number 4. We have met the enemy, and it is us. Alrighty, sir. Your choices again
Superpowers.
are... Superpowers. All right, no superpowers, but it is the next best thing. We are traveling to Austria for this one. Recently, an Austrian supermarket was temporarily shut down because they found Brazilian wandering spiders roaming the aisles.
Oh, you and the spiders.
I know, super creepy, but are you familiar with the unusual side effects of Brazilian wandering spiders?
You go hairless.
No, and it is not, well, I guess technically, maybe eventually, but it causes, let's just say, some excitement in your nether region.
No.
Yes.
What?
An erection is a side effect of a spider bite by the Brazilian wandering spider.
No way.
Yes, it is medically proven. It can be painful and last for hours. And then you brag to your friends about it.
How do you not rename the spider Viagra?
I know. In fact, they're using the spider's venom as research into alternatives.
Research. Is that what they're calling it?
I just want to know. I want to be on that scientific team. Hi, you know what I research?
I just like the idea that in the future, you don't have to take a pill. You're just like, honey, give me a moment. I need to get bit.
Yes, give me the spider.
You know, I just need to get bit by a spider and
we'll
we're
be
good
fine.
to go.
Everything's going to be good.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. All righty, your next choice. Law only a suggestion, dangerous Chinese export, or we've met the enemy.
I think I want to hear the superpowers one again. No. We've met the enemy.
All right, we have met the enemy, and they are us. After facing off with the Ukrainian troops, the frontiers are getting very dangerous. They're near Moscow, but in a coordinated activity, there has been some fighting breaking out, and recently 20 Russian soldiers were killed in an altercation.
What?
With other Russian soldiers.
Why?
Yes, 2 different factions inside of the Russian army have begun to war with each other and gotten very angry. And so recently they were shooting at each other, killing 20 Russian servicemen, which again, if your enemy is deciding to destroy themselves, get out of the way and just enjoy the scene. Yeah. Alrighty. Your final choice this morning. Law only a suggestion at this point, or another dangerous Chinese export?
I'm going to go with Trump. I mean, law is only a suggestion at this
Law
point.
is only a suggestion. We are traveling to Minnesota for this fun story. City officials in Goodhue met earlier this week to discuss their next steps because they no longer have a police force.
What?
Yeah, earlier in late last week, all
was this Denver?
all of the police force handed in their resignation letters. Now, Goodhue is a very small town. They only had 7 police officers, but everybody decided to resign. The county, of course, said, we're totally blindsided by this, but we are resilient and we are going to move forward. But we ask everybody to not do any crime stuff for the next few weeks until we figure this out. So basically, they say that they're bringing in some part-timers, some other stuff.
Why did they quit?
Recruitment problems and current pay, the officer said, wasn't competitive. And they said they can get better jobs somewhere else. And if you aren't going to pay us, what we need to in order to live and work here, then we will go and fight crime somewhere else where they pay us. And fair enough. Yeah. So they lost their entire police force.
Once you write that story, if you're a criminal, are you like, hey, everybody?
Exactly. That's the thing.
Let's go to Bill's house now.
That's why I said, the law is a mere suggestion at this point in Goodhue, Minnesota. So yeah, that's what happens. So unfortunately, that is all the time we have. Oh no, it is time for our bumper music to hit. So you do not get to hear our wonderful sponsor. And that really sucks because I need to be able to go to McDonald's today and I would like to cash the check. So we'll have to save that till tomorrow.
Darn it, man.
That's all
We're
I got.
Still progressing, though, towards the loser edition on Friday, which is good. Listen, when we come back, we're going to be joined in studio by the lawman of lawmen. His name is Art Acevedo. You know him better as Ponch from Chips. He'll be in studio next. Get your questions ready. Text him in. Call him in 303-696-1971. George Brauchler 710 KNUS. George Brauchler back with you here, 710 KNUS. It had been my goal, my hope, dream, if you will, to announce to you that in studio is Chief Art Acevedo from the Aurora Police Department. I don't see him, and I'm in a very small studio. There's no chance he's hiding anywhere. So he's not here yet. So playing the role of Chief Art Acevedo will be Billy Thorpe. Chief, how are things in Aurora these days?
Everything's on fire. No, I'm sorry. I just called back to Bill Owens.
You know what? That was your Reagan Chicago Cubs incoming missiles thing.
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
People right now are like, "Oh my God, Aurora's
Oh my
on fire!
God,
How could
it's
George
horrible."
joke with Billy?" I
Yeah.
mean, Chief Art Acevedo about that. Chief, your decision to become a police officer. Why?
Well, because I got to a point where being a professional adult entertainer was no longer going to be viable. See, he's never going to come on the show again. I'm going to get him in so much trouble.
This is it. I wonder, though,
Yeah.
if people will even notice the transition from you to him when he finally gets here. What's the most amount of money you made in any one night of dancing?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I think at one point, probably $7 in nickels.
Not even sure how they stuck the more they got stuck.
Well, the thing is
But
it's in the prison purse.
oh,
Sorry.
no, Jesus.
I told you,
Oh.
special power. I can always make whatever we're doing more
We're
uncomfortable.
outside the safety of the 6
Yes,
o'clock
I
hour.
know.
We are in danger.
I know
right
we're
now.
in danger zone.
Danger.
This is
Will
why we need
Robinson.
to have the guest in here now, because otherwise I will take this completely off the rails.
Listen, I do want to ask the chief all the good questions that are out there. So people have texted in questions. So here's one question: when will Aurora be fully staffed with cops?
Ooh, good question.
That's a good question. Another one, an important one, is adding ass to clown redundant.
Yeah, I feel it's more of a descriptor.
That
Yeah.
obviously isn't the
Yeah,
isn't the one
I
right
think.
there. How about this? Remember the story you read in the 6 about Silva, the young man who was
Yeah,
killed by
yep.
and the question is Silva a gang member? His killing reeks of gang violence. Please
Yeah.
ask the chief about A-Town's
question.
gangs, gang neighborhoods, and gang impact on APS and
Yeah.
Cherry Creek
We should also
schools.
see. Now, he probably doesn't have the inside track, but we can also talk about Elitch's moving out there. Because you see our friends
Hold on,
over
is Elitch just moving to Aurora?
our friends at Westward, Patty Calhoun's
Patty.
publication just last week had a story that talked about the conversation between Elitch's and Mayor Mike Kaufman and how they're giving
Weak
a
Mayor Mike Kaufman. now.
long, hard look at a location in Aurora.
Oh, you
that was
just
a
went Newt
surprise.
Gingrich right there. What was that?
I think I swallowed a spider. Hang on.
Don't put them in your mouth. I've told you that before. Please don't put spiders in your mouth.
But they tickle.
You don't know where they've been.
Yeah.
It's going to get caught on the glottis, and then you've got problems.
There was a good thing I didn't say what popped into my head.
Yeah. I don't understand why you're exercising discretion now, because you said prison purse
I know.
earlier. I mean,
I know. That's the thing is my filter. It's just not.
yeah, it's broken.
It
obviously
is.
today.
It really is.
Look,
Yeah, but they're talking about the location. Obviously, we talked about it out near the airport. There's a lot of
Really?
empty land out there. Well, the advantage inside of the story was that in the metro area, Aurora is blessed as one of the few things that not a lot of other jurisdictions have, and that is land.
Boom.
Yeah, empty land, and a lot of empty land out near the airport. And so they're talking about, obviously, we talked about this over a year ago, that out near the Gaylord of the Rockies is where that thing's going to drop, because they're going to use that, and then they are going to dangle the carrot in front of both the Nuggets, Avs, and then also in front of our Denver Broncos.
for Walmart
Yeah.
Stadium or Walmart Complex, you know that's coming.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I can't wait for it to happen, because then there will be even less reason. And Denverites, you should want this too. Less reason for cars to be
Yeah.
in your precious walkable city.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you don't have to worry about it. You've taken away all the reasons for it. And along with it, all those businesses that are dependent upon the Nuggets, the
Yeah.
Rockies, the Avs, I guess the Rockies will stay, and the Broncos, you don't have to worry about them either, because they'll move out to Aurora, and then you can have a completely train-driven,
Yeah.
walkable city,
Yep. You
bikes
guys-
everywhere.
you guys
It'll
can
be
get-
Mecca.
Yeah, you guys can get on the train to come and see the the teams you used to have in the city. It'd
Yeah,
be great.
and you can get on the train and
Yeah.
go out there to go
Yep.
have have dinner at a restaurant that no longer can sustain itself in
Yeah.
a city that lacks these franchises. That's not a big deal.
That won't matter at all.
I
No.
think that's a wonderful opportunity for
Yes, it
Aurora.
is.
This is how Aurora ends up eclipsing Denver as
Yes.
the crown jewel here on the
It
Front
is.
Range. I don't really want that to happen. I mean, again, I grew up in Lakewood, which was just outside of Denver. I used to go to Denver all the time. It's just so different. I can't handle it in good ways and in bad ways, but the bad ways seem to be the ones that dominate me. More questions for Chief Art Acevedo. We'll rack them up here as we try to find out if he is a hostage somewhere. It says,
What?
Jacqueline's texting in to correct something. He goes, I just want to make it clear. He said, good morning, guys. My husband was not an alcoholic or a drunk. I was teasing. This is a reference to a conversation we had about getting out of jury duty yesterday. I think she spent 24 hours worrying that we thought that her husband was an alcoholic, when instead it was just her advice to him on how to get out of jury duty. Just tell them you're an alcoholic.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you don't have to worry about
how
that.
difficult would it be to just bring the flask with you? I mean, it doesn't have to have anything in it more than water or coffee, but you can just
you just announce I need a pot break or something like that in the middle of the thing. And then you don't have to worry about it. Listen, I want to while we're waiting on Chief Art Acevedo, I do want to continue, if not wrap up for now, part of the discussion. We spent a long time yesterday going through that 98-page indictment. That was huge. I've spent more time reading those Georgia laws. And I told you yesterday, I thought that the indictment was really aggressive and very broad and ambitious. And I guess I sort of still think that's true, but what I think is truer or more true, depending upon what the right words are, I think, it sounds like we're going to have the chief by phone. But what I found out is more true is I think that the laws of Georgia are just that broad and permit such an aggressive approach. That leads to some, I think, complications for the president, but we'll talk about those later. Joining us, not in studio, because he's not in studio, he's on the phone. If he were in studio on the phone, that would be dumb. It's Chief Art Acevedo from Aurora. Sir, thanks for joining us.
Oh, yeah. Good morning. How's it going, George?
Buddy, it would be going better if you were sitting across from me 10 minutes ago.
It would be a lot better for me. Trust me.
I hope you're okay. Wherever you're at, if you need bail money, I can't help you. But if you need me to talk someone out of keeping you hostage, I'm happy to give it a shot.
No, I think I'll be all right, but it's not good. Well, how's it going?
Well, we miss you in studio. We were all set to have a live shot of you next to a shot of Punch from Chips, and now we don't get to do that. Now we just get to have the shot of Punch from Chips. So listen, thanks for joining us. We'll get back into the habit of having you on regularly, and my hope is next time we'll get you back in studio, but I know your schedule is crazy because it turns out Aurora's very, very busy. And to that end, let me ask you, what the hell's going on out there in police world in Aurora?
Well, lots going on. You know, we obviously are continuing to do a good job of fighting crime with all our violent crime continues to be down. And finally, after about a year getting together, we're going to start our program to actually go out and focus on young people that are, you know, on the path to committing violent crimes or a life of violent crime. We brought all the stakeholders in, trained everybody, and I think we're going to be rocking and rolling, getting that program going.
What's that program called? Does it have a special name?
It's Focus Deterrent. You know, it's part of our public safety partnership with the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and it just brings in a lot of stakeholders in government, obviously with their probation and the police department, the courts, and then a lot of our private non-government agencies that are going to help us. And we're hoping to turn some lives around. You know, there's way too much violent crime with these young people, and hopefully this will make a difference. You know,
in relation to that, there's a couple stories out there, same topic, by the way, but on different stations, about a Reverend Dr. Jose Silva who has said, hey, I want to put pressure on Aurora authorities to find the killer of my 27-year-old nephew, Karis Silva, who was killed in front of a Conoco gas station just about, 10 days ago, maybe 11 days ago. Question from a texter already before you got on, and that was, does this have gang overtones, and can the chief talk about gang issues in A-Town?
You know, I'm don't want to talk specific about that case, but I can just tell you that gangs, in terms of our region and in many big cities, are always a problem. And unfortunately, a lot of time folks don't understand that when you get involved with certain people, certain groups, certain activity, your chances of ending up a victim, right, is of a crime is always much higher. As a matter of fact, when we look at homicides every year, one of the things that I like to do when I report back to the community, which we'll do after the new year, is do an analysis of victim analysis, suspect analysis, because statistics are, one thing, but what the community wants to know, what does it mean to me, right? What are the chances of me being murdered or the victim of violent crime? And quite honestly, when we look at those things, we end up noticing that the majority of the people, or a good number of the folks that end up being the victim of a violent crime, especially a murder, too often are involved in either gang activity or drug activity or some other activity that, it's dangerous. You're dealing with people that are violent, and you're dealing with people that will shoot you at the drop of a hat. So
that sounds horrifying.
It's an issue. Yeah, I mean, it's just the world we live in. And then now today, when you look at some of these violence involving these young kids, social media is the other piece, right? Where any kind of beef over insult, it's just incredible what some of these young people will shoot another person for in 2023.
When you look back on your career, and it's been long and it's been in a bunch of different areas, how have gangs changed in terms of how are they in Aurora today versus where else you've been?
Well, there's not a hierarchy like there has been in the past, right? Where you knew like a chain of command, right? These gangs today, they're hard to identify. Any leadership, it's hard to actually try to put any put people together. They're fluid. They move in and out of different sets, and it's not like in the past where you'd see these OGs that are almost from birth to death. They're all part of the same exact set. So it's a different world. It's almost like people don't want to keep jobs and stay in the same company for 30, 40 years. Like the baby boomers used to do. You'd go to the same company and you work forever. These gang members today, a blood can be a part of a blood set today, and they could be a Crip tomorrow, or they can work together. The alliances changes. It's just a much different society that we deal with in terms of our gangsters and just society in general. And so it makes combating them, I think, that much more difficult. And then you have here in this area, a legislature in the state that has become so much more permissive in too many places across the country where, people don't go one door and out the other, especially at a young age. We don't do anything to try to get them out of the environment, especially when they're young, that they're in. And consequently, they end up, you end up dead. I mean, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. And that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges we're having in our area.
We're talking with Art Acevedo, Chief of Police for the Aurora Police Department. Can we talk car theft? Any idea, and maybe you've already released them, any idea when we're going to get something more definitive, and maybe you can give us a sense of it on how the numbers have moved in response to, because of, or maybe in spite of the change in the law that allows Aurora to jail car thieves, unlike the state law, which allows car thieves to be put right back into other cars?
Well, you know what? I always forget to bring that with me. I'm going to have to just bring it. I know some of my guys are listening. Make sure we bring it. But I know that vehicle theft continues to trend downward for us in Aurora, and I think that is a product of the fact that we've hardened, made it a little bit more difficult for the bad folks in Aurora, that they know that we can actually put them in jail, that they will have consequences. And people don't realize this, but a lot of times crimes are of the moment, it's a heated moment. Somebody gets shot out of, something happens at the moment. But car thieves actually plan on stealing cars more often than not. And if I can steal a car in Denver or in some other town near here without consequences or next to no consequences, or steal one in Aurora where you're actually going to go to jail and spend some time behind bars, you're going to go do your thing somewhere else. So I think it has had an impact, and I'm grateful that our city council actually took action to make it more costly, more painful for individuals to victimize folks in the city.
Can we talk about some traffic stuff? A photo speed enforcement program, which is PSED or PSEP. I don't know if it's supposed to have a catchy name like Save or something, but it's got a pilot program that started yesterday in the city. Describe for us, one, what it is, and two, what's the goal?
Well, look, the goal is to get people to slow down, especially in neighborhoods. And unfortunately, people like to drive fast or in a hurry everywhere they go. And we're trying to save lives. And so we did a conditioning period where, we weren't issuing citations. Nobody was actually getting an actual ticket. The conditioning period has ended. And now these photo enforcement vans will be going to, we're going to be deployed to different places around the city based on complaints and obviously crash data if we have any that we need to address. And so it is, it's not a moving violation. It's really a civil citation, but one that comes with teeth. If you don't pay for it, unfortunately, you end up potentially going to collections. It can ruin your credit. They have ways to get you to pay, but there's also a way to fight it where you can actually ask for an appeal of if it's not you driving and so on and so forth. So the vans are finally out. The first one's finally out, and I think we're going to have 3 more coming. But there's going to be a van in your neighborhood, so please slow down because we want you home, at work, at school, and not in the hospital, in the morgue, where unfortunately fatalities are continue to go up in our city and across the country, actually, in most places across the country, after many, many years of the mileage death rate going down. It's the last few years it's going up, and that's not something that we should be, that's something that we actually be very concerned about because it doesn't discriminate. Traffic crashes hit good neighborhoods, bad neighborhoods, high crime, low crime. There's it doesn't discriminate. It can impact anybody.
Chief, what do the vans look like, and where will they be today?
There's a white one. If you look out your window, George,
is that it?
Right around that.
Billy, pay attention. He's talking to you.
Yeah.
Listen, some folks will say, and I know this because we kind of had this debate in Douglas County some years ago. Some people will say, oh, this is just an attempt to raise revenue for the city. This isn't really about enforcement. If someone were to ask the question, Chief, why instead of putting vans there, why not just put a cop car there, even an unmarked car? What would you say?
Well, because unfortunately we don't have enough. We just don't have enough officers, and technology. I talk about it all the time. It is a force multiplier that helps us, fight crime, and so we just don't have the bandwidth. And quite honestly, I think if you talk to elected officials, you talk to our commanders, then more times than not, the number one complaint that police departments get is always traffic related. People are speeding down my streets. My kids, I'm afraid my kids are going to get run over. It is the number one complaint. And for me, it's really, it's not about bringing in money to the city. It's about just changing behavior. Look, I wish we could put these vans out, and I wish not we wouldn't write a single ticket, but unfortunately, that's just not realistic. People just don't know how to get the foot off the gas, and a ticket changes behavior. You get that one ticket in a neighborhood, and usually, or people see the van, they're going to slow down, and that's really the ultimate goal. It's not their issue of citation; it's to change behavior, and this ultimately is to save lives.
To the extent that your hostage takers will allow you, since we don't have you in studio, can you stick around for a few more questions after this little bit of a break?
Absolutely.
Look, we're talking with Art Acevedo. Thank you, Chief. He is the chief for the Aurora Police Department, answering our questions, but yours too. So listen, I know he'll take calls. You can call in at 303-696-1971, or you can text us in off of the app. I keep saying the website, and then Mark told me we don't do text off the website. It's only the app. So get the app and text in the show. It's impressive, by the way, given the volume of text that we get on a daily basis. But keep that going, and we'll keep talking to the chief when we come back. Before I cut you loose, though, I want to let you know I'm in the breaks here. I get on the internet and I take a look at the email that I get. And one of them, again, every single day is this updated email about homes that are available in Douglas County. I just like to keep track of things like that. And here's what I'm seeing. More and more homes being listed. I'm seeing a little bit of a drop in the number of them that say price reduced. I've even seen a couple that are price increase. And it makes me wonder, man, if I'm in the market for a house right now, and I'm not, but if I'm in a market for a house right now, how in the world do I navigate these crazy waters? There's no way you can do this, or you should do this by yourself. You should pick up the phone and call Gay Ribble at Empower Home Team of Keller Williams. And it's not just Gay, it's her whole team of people that are committed to the same thing. And that is making this stressful endeavor less stressful and successful for you. It costs you nothing to pick up the phone and call them, and you're going to be thankful that you did. In fact, you're going to be so thankful that after you sign up with them, I want you to text the show or call into the show. You can tell Billy, hell, we may even put you on the radio. Tell us about how awesome the experience was. It's a simple number. It's 833, that's easy, 301-SOLD, S-O-L-D, 833-301-SOLD. Because they have all the buyers, 14,000 plus buyers just waiting for you to list your home. And all you have to do to access it is to go to the website, learn more, and then call 833-301-SOLD. It's Gay, G-A-Y-E, hasthebuyers.com, gayhasthebuyers.com. When we come back, your questions and mine, hell, Billy may even have a question for Chief Art Acevedo from Aurora Police Department. When we come back, George Brauchler, 710 KNUS.
Why should you buy your next vehicle at Castle Rock Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram? We make car shopping easy. We have a huge inventory of new and pre-owned vehicles. We can even custom order. We make it easy. Easy financing, friendly staff. And when it comes to quality service, our expert technicians keep your vehicle in top shape. Visit us today off of Highway 25 and Plum Creek, or shop online at castlerockcdjr.com. Castle Rock Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram. Car shopping made easy. Why should you buy?
George Brauchler, 710 KNUS, back with Chief Art Acevedo from the Aurora Police Department. Chief, thanks for staying on with us.
Hey, thanks for keeping me on. And I just remembered our youth program. Actually, I didn't remember. I had to text somebody. I couldn't remember the name. The acronym is SAVE, which is Standing Against Violence Every Day. That's what they came up with. I just did not remember.
That actually sounds like saved. Unless, is every day one word? Because in the email that Big Joe sent, he separated every day out into two words. So it's either save or save. One seems, if the other seems past tense.
That's save. Standing Against Violence Every Day.
Joe, every day is going to be one word for this acronym. Just saying. A couple questions from texters. Here's one. What insights do you have about the 3 cartels in the Denver area? Some of the car thefts and robberies are being associated with these cartels. They are heavily armed.
Well, you know what? Cartels frequently will actually utilize stolen cars to take south of the border. And when they're going south of the border, they're actually taking guns and money back to Mexico. And so they're obviously active here, and just like they are in most American big cities and metropolitan areas. So they exist. They're not just anymore in drug trafficking, gun trafficking. They're also in human trafficking. It's a big part of their portfolio. And so we are actually going to increase our partnership, strengthen our partnership with the DEA here in this region to continue to combat these violent cartels. And you know, at the end of the day, it's something that we're going to not give up the fight on. It's an important fight, and one that we're going to continue to bring forward against them.
This is another question from a texter, and I don't know the background on this. Maybe this will make sense to you. It says, question for the chief, ask why he needed to demobilize the traffic units.
Well, we didn't actually demobilize the traffic units. We only have one traffic unit. That's really our MET team, which is our motorcycle enforcement team. We adjusted their hours, and because our staffing is, it's low right now, and we have to utilize overtime every day for our patrol officers. We've actually adjusted their hours. I'm not going to say exactly what they are, but they're actually been working later into the night, into the early evening, which will be a good thing. But on days where patrol is short, they will be utilized on those occasions. And we can't fill it with overtime. They'll be utilized on those occasions to backfill patrol. And we're probably going to do that here in the next few weeks with some of our, folks who are doing administrative work. It's critical work, but I'm not done with the analysis, see what the impact is in terms of if we start taking those folks off. But the good news is that we have a class come up in September that so far we've already sent out, I believe, about 30 offers to folks, final offers to bring them to work for us. And if we get 35 in one class, which I'm hopeful we'll still get, if not more, that'll be more people in cadet class, one academy training class than we had all last year. So I think that the fact that the City Council and the Social Service Commission came together to actually give us the ability to recruit folks, we're really hopeful that.
Are your numbers showing an increase? Are you finding it easier to recruit than maybe 6 months ago, a year ago?
I think we're actually doing the recruiting now. They changed the rules, Civil Service Commission, where from beginning to end, the police department is actually doing the recruiting along with the city. And you know what? It's just a better model. And so we just started this process about 6-8 weeks ago, and we're really, really hopeful that we're going to have, for the first time in a long time, a decent sized class, and we can keep replicating that for the upcoming classes. You're going to see a lot more black and whites out in our community, which is a good thing.
Chief Art Acevedo, will you be willing to take some phone calls?
Absolutely.
Mark from Denver, you're on 710 with Chief Acevedo and me, Little George. What's going on, man? What's your question?
Well, I'm actually from Aurora.
And it says Denver on the call thing. Please forgive me, man.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I understand that. I've had my pickup stolen twice from out in front of my house, recovered it both times. But if these cars and stuff go to Mexico, how come they're not catching this stuff in New Mexico? Because when you drive south, there's plate readers, and they hit every single car down the interstate, and we cross to go into Mexico at a very lonely spot, and they scan everybody southbound. How are they not catching them?
Well, a lot of times these guys will actually defeat that technology by either switching plates, having no plates. They'll travel at night when there's not that much coverage, and especially in some of these other states where, I mean, even in Colorado, you drive, how often do you even see a police officer on our highways, on the roadways? It's there's just not that much of a presence, and so that's how they get them down there. And quite often when you're smuggling things up or down, north or south, you try to take other desolate roads, and that's their business, and it's sad. But I'm sorry that you got your truck stolen twice, by the way. But I'm glad that it got recovered and did not end up south of the border. I've got a '97 Toyota that I love, and my wife keeps parking it in the street, and I keep telling her not to because I'm afraid that someday I'm going to wake up and she'll be gone. And that's in another city, in another state where they're at in Texas, and so far it hasn't happened. But that's how they do it, and quite honestly, it's frustrating. I remember many years ago being in Mexico and actually finding a police chief in a stolen car when I was there training some folks back in the 90s. Oh yeah.
Well, they're still getting the catalytic converters. I did lose those.
Mark, thank you for that phone call. Chief, catalytic converters, that's something else where they don't have to steal the car. They're just crawling under there, cutting them out, and then taking them. Same issue, same response from the public. Like, what can be done here?
Yeah, what's interesting is in my capacity in terms of a consultant, I actually helped advise the largest catalytic converter recycling company in the country, and that's PGM of Texas. And they actually got a law passed last year in Texas where it made it a felony to actually steal a catalytic converter. Think about this for a minute. In Texas, it used to be that if you were caught with a catalytic converter that was stolen, it's a felony. But if you stole one, it was a misdemeanor.
What?
And so we were able to
just got to get rid of it quick.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there may be opportunities to strengthen the laws here as well. And one of the things that I advise them is that there needs to be federal legislation on federal licensing and what the requirements are. So we have 50 states in terms of when you're transporting these things across state lines with the same rules, right? The same licensing requirements. So it'll make it easier for law enforcement. And so I think that if we did that, especially at the federal level, that's going to be a very helpful. And in my old department in Houston, they've been making some really good federal cases, which is something I hope we can do here. I don't think that I've seen as many complaints about catalytic converters as I was seeing when I was back in Texas, but I think there's still room to strengthen the laws to be able to combat that.
Chief, last question for you from inside our building right here, from inside our office, and that is, hey, there are homeless encampments that are very close to where we're at, about 225 and Parker Road-ish, and you guys do a good job of cleaning them out when they pop up, but as soon as you're gone, they just rebuild. I mean, this thing is like an anthill in a way. Is there some way to keep them from rebuilding every single day under that overpass? Or are there some rules or laws that are keeping you from doing that?
Well, I think that there are some things that are on the works in terms of signage and part of the challenge on that Parker area there is that there's more than one jurisdiction involved, but that is actually on the radar for the city. And we are now in the process of putting together a comprehensive strategy to try to impact that location. And one of the things that I think that we need to think about is, from an environmental standpoint, how do we, what kind of foliage do you have there? I mean, what kind of ground cover do you have there? how can we design it or redesign areas to make it impossible for people to create campgrounds. But for me, I would say that when we found a low shelter area somewhere, outside of a neighborhood, where that's where you kind of relocate people, because there was a Supreme Court case that said you can't move people unless you have somewhere to put them, right? Unless you have somewhere to go.
Yeah, right.
And the police department, unfortunately, that's not our. We don't get to make
That's
those
not your
decisions.
thing,
Right. But if it was me, I would find a location where you have a little bear shelter, fence it up, put in some services there, and that's where you get to do your camping, not just anywhere you want in the city.
Chief, I think we have exhausted all the time we have with you. Pretty pleased with a badge on top. Join us in studio next month when we have you back on.
I will, my friend. I appreciate it. And to your listeners, please know school's back in, so let's all slow down and watch out for our kids.
If you were planning on giving out your personal cell phone number, now's the chance. Nope,
sure,
I guess that's it. That's it. It's 911-323. Yeah. Chief Art Acevedo with Aurora. We'll talk to you soon, sir. Thanks.
All right, guys. Have a great week.
Thank you. Hey, we're going to come back with the time that we have left. We're going to be joined by the super smarties there at Alpine Planning. And then, of course, in the 8 o'clock hour, we'll get back to your calls at 303-696-1971. We also have on super investigative reporter Dave Migoya from the Denver and Colorado Springs Gazette. It's another story about the bench. This one, again, I don't want to tease it any more than that. The guy just keeps pulling back layers of stuff. I don't know what it ends up like, but I just love that this guy's out there. Listen to the conversation at 8 o'clock. Stick around. We'll be back in just a moment. It's George Brauchler, 710 KNUS.
Imagine the lifelong impact of a journey to the Holy Land, surrounded by like-minded travelers. Picture yourself stepping foot in iconic locations right out of history. With nationally syndicated radio hosts Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher, you'll gain firsthand understanding of the spiritual and political importance of this vital region.
Hi, it's Mike Gallagher here. I hope you'll join Dennis Prager and me on an amazing journey through Israel in October 2023.
Discover Israel's vibrant culture and why this nation is such a strategic partner for the United States. Join Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher on this life-enriching Israel tour, October 25th through November 3rd, 2023. For more information, call 855-565-5519 or visit standwithisraeltour.com.
George Brauchler back with you here at 710 KNUS. This is normally the time we get made smarter by our good folks at Alpine Planning. I presume they're with Chief Art Acevedo, also not where we thought he was going to be at the time that we had him on the radio, but my great thanks to him for being with us for a couple segments and answering your questions, both on the phone and in text. I couldn't get to all the phone calls. I apologize for that. Next time we will get it. While we wait for Alpine Planning, let me tell you that I was starting this conversation with you back while we were waiting on Art. And that was, I went through the indictment again on Trump, and we'll talk with our 9 o'clock guest about this. National fantastic reporter named Sadie Gurman from from Wall Street Journal. And it was about this latest indictment out of Georgia. I think I told you yesterday, I thought it was particularly broad and aggressive. I think the aggressive part is real, but in looking at, and I spent a lot of time looking at the Georgia statutes, and they have some annotations, which means some case laws that help explain some of the language and issues with it. I read through those, and I think the conclusion I'm coming to is that Georgia's RICO law is just so broad and forgiving for prosecutors that even though the intent of the General Assembly, and I'd read you that part, was to focus on these crimes that were motivated by pecuniary gain, threats, violence, all that other stuff. None of the things are present here, I think, in the case against Donald Trump and 18 other co-defendants. At the same time, there are so many delineated crimes, and I read you a bunch of them, that are predicate acts for racketeering activity, that I think that Fanni Willis, and by the way, I heard someone say it's Fanni Willis. Whatever her name's supposed to be pronounced, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. So if it's Fanni Willis, it's Fanni. But Miss Willis, I think she has, I guess, the legal authority to pursue this, but also will likely pass appellate muster in the state appellate system if she gets a conviction here, because it is enough for predicate acts for you to have lied to a state official. That's amazing. And one more thing, you only need one more thing. You only need 2 crimes to be committed by this loosely affiliated group. And so by using these very broad, forgiving racketeering statutes and associated sections of that law, it makes it very easy for her, at least on paper, procedurally, to pursue the president and these other 18 people. Now, she has said, hey, I want to have this trial within 6 months, and I want to do one trial with all 19 co-defendants. Listen, if you're a betting person, and I'm usually not, but in this case, I would take your easy money. That ain't never going to happen. I can't see it happening in 6 months, not with the schedule that's in front of the president. But 2, I can't see 19 people going to trial at the same time. I've never seen it, certainly not in my career. And I don't think it would be a successful pursuit anyway, to have that many people sitting there, some of whom are just so tangentially related to what took place. Not that it doesn't fit under their Georgia's RICO, which is very different from federal RICO, and it's different from Colorado's COCA cases, which is kind of it's like our version of RICO. I think she has a passable case against the president, and I guess if I were going to again rank order these cases, and I told you before, I think the Mar-a-Lago one in Miami, it poses the greatest threat to the president. I just think it's tactically smart. It's very conservative. The evidence is going to be easy to produce and to get admitted. I think that's the scariest one for DJT. I had told you in the past that I thought that the prosecution out of New York was far and away one of the worst things that I've seen. It's hyper political. The indictment itself is garbage. The way Alvin Bragg, who's more and more looking like a guy who's never been in a courtroom, has approached this, makes it the weakest of the 4 cases. I mean, way weak. In between there had been Jack Smith's approach on this January 6th prosecution out of DC. I also think that's ridiculously aggressive and unprecedented. And I don't think that one smells like legit to me. It smells more political to me. This one out of Georgia, I think it's the second. I think it's definitely, it poses a greater risk to the president because of the Georgia laws. And I'll say this too, there's no federal pardon power for a state conviction. So if DJT gets all the way to November and he's been prosecuted and convicted in Georgia, and I've read some more, by the way, in this, hey, there's a mandatory 5-year prison thing. I heard Hugh say that before us. Yeah, sort of. On paper, it says that, but in practice, it's not mandatory 5 years prison. It has been up to the discretion of the judge. So I'm less concerned about the incarceration thing for the president, but there's no appeal that is going to save him, in my opinion, at least the way the case is postured, and he doesn't have the ability to pardon himself. One other thing you should know about, and this is very interesting, came across this in an article that was about Mark Meadows. And this article said that Mark Meadows was seeking to have his case removed to federal court. And I thought, what? A state criminal case removed to federal court? As it turns out, there is a federal law that absolutely permits a state criminal case to be taken away from the state and sent to the feds. It's 28 USC, that's United States Code, section 1441. It's called removal of civil actions. This thing may provide a vehicle, and I'm looking for the criminal corollary. There may be a vehicle to remove this to federal court, and then I don't know what happens. If he's president, it's different than this. Listen, when we come back, David Migoya, super investigative reporter from the Gazette, talking about the judges again. Stick around. George Brauchler, 710 KNUS. Well, we're halfway through the show, about halfway through the week and halfway through the month of August. George Brauchler here on the George Show, 710 KNUS. We get replaced by Chuck Kirk at 10, Prager at 1, at 11, Gorka at 1, and then Deb Flora, live and local here from 3 to 4, and then Stephen Tubbs back here in the saddle, shedding off whatever viruses he brought with him from 4 to 7 o'clock. Dennis Prager will be here in person at the View House in Centennial on August the 30th. You can get your tickets at 710knus.com. It's the third annual Dennis Prager Cigar Night. Get a chance in an intimate setting to sit and listen to Dennis. You'll get a chance to meet all of your favorite radio hosts and me. And as well as I think you get a free premium cigar, a free drink. There's a carving station. There's other stuff. I keep threatening a hug for folks. It's not from me, obviously, but at this point, let's just say Stefan will give you a hug with your ticket too. Let's not tell him. Let's just do it. Let's just go up and start hugging him at the View House. Yeah. And someone else needs to work the camera while this goes on. Maybe that'll be me. Listen, do it. It's a Dennis Prager third annual cigar night. Listen, right now I want to go to the VIP line, bring up super investigative reporter for the Denver Gazette. His name is Dave Migoya. Thanks for joining us, sir.
I'll give you a hug, George.
Yeah, you don't even have to buy a ticket, man. It's going to happen. Can I ask you, speaking of needing to give each other hugs, Yankees, man, what's going on? And is it time to write off the season? My son was telling me he read some story where people are like, yep, we need to start bringing up folks from the farm system. And I'm like, is this an acknowledgement that we're done? Or is this an effort to say we need to do something?
I am among the many, many fans. I've been reading Twitter lately on this very topic, and everybody's just shaking their head going, if old man Steinbrenner were still around, we would not have this problem.
No.
There would be heads in the street, bodies in the aisle. I mean, it would be mayhem. I don't understand it. I don't get it.
Is it the injury bug? Is it because of the injuries?
Yeah, it's all the above. I mean, losing is a funny thing. It just attracts more losing. And when you get that mindset, you start pressing. Boy, it's hard to hit 100-mile-an-hour ball when you really feel the pressure.
Idea that we are double-digit games behind a team that rhymes with the Orioles, I just want to spit up in my mouth.
Well, it used to be, I had to say, having grown up in the Bronx, we always say, look, the Yankees, if it's not this year, it's next year. If it's not next year, it's the following year. But as long as the Red Sox finish behind us, we're fine. But right now, we're the ones laying on our back looking up.
How can you be at 500 and be in last place? It's the most competitive division probably in any sport. It's crazy.
By far, you look at the Yankees record over 500, they would at least be in second place, I think, in the American League West, which is an awful division, and third place for sure, and in the playoffs and in the other league. So it's terrible.
To put that division in perspective, we are probably now 6.5 games out of the wild card, and we're in last place in a division where everybody ahead of us for the wild card is in our division.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, it's absolutely terrible. The team is it's a solid team. They just can't put it together. I'm opening the paper here, 14.5 out at 500. And I can't remember the last time the Yankees were in last place at this time of year.
No.
We're all thinking about, us old fans, we're starting to think about the year that the Yankees came back on the Red Sox, 14 games out, Bucky Dent home run, to go to the World, eventually go to World Series. It was terrific. But, I don't know that that's going to happen this year. But the Orioles, God bless the Orioles. Baltimore needs an adjust every so often. They all start waving around Brooks Robinson and Dave Palmer and that whole great team of that period. Fabulous. I'm glad they're doing it.
You mean the team that lost to the Mets?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But Cal Ripken's probably jumping up and down. I mean, good for those guys. Yeah. I'm glad every once in a bit because you know what? It stops people from saying the most annoying thing. Oh, those Yankees just buying another championship. It doesn't work like that anymore, people.
No, not at all.
No.
Let's get to another team that seems to be struggling here in a bit, and that is the bench, the judicial bench.
Yeah, that's right.
You
always go to the
continue.
bench.
I wish I could find out, how do you even know to look for some of these things that you end up finding? this particular story, it's like it could have been a 1-paragraph story if you'd have just said, hey, here's the statistic. But as you continue to read this latest story, you read more and more facts where you're like, this is optically horrible. I mean, they need somebody there to do an image makeover for the bench. Tell us what you've discovered now.
Well, a couple of weeks back, because of the whole Clarence Thomas thing, I had already had the idea to take a look at the financial disclosure records of our Supreme Court in Colorado. These are, you as a DA, remember, you had to do it yourself.
Yep.
Every year, elected officials from the governor all the way on down to the para board, you have to file a financial statement that discloses publicly all of your holdings, those of your spouse or partner, and those of your children. It's basically to be sure everybody gets a good look at who you are obligated to and whether or not that might fit into your work as either a politician or, more particularly here, a judge. So there's no conflict of interest. You don't want a judge owning stock in a company and then working on a particular decision in court that might benefit that company and, by extension, the judge. Anyhow, so that's required every single year. Even if you haven't changed your financial circumstances, you have to file a form that says, I haven't changed my circumstances. So everything from last year is still good for this year. So once we did the piece about the Supreme Court, I started thinking, there's a lot of other judges in this state, and it's a bit of a daunting task. And that's really where the idea came from. So you know what? Let's run all 358 of them. And instead of actually looking at the details of those disclosures yet, let's just find out the last time that they filed. And if everybody is up to date, terrific. Well, what we found out is 1 in every 6 judges in our state has not filed that form last year, and roughly 24 of them have multiple years that they haven't filed,
Good Lord.
including members of the discipline commissions whose job it is to mete out discipline on judges who have misconduct, such as not filing their disclosure.
That's what got me, was that one right there. You've got judges sitting in judgment of other judges, a lot of judgy words in there, and they haven't complied either. It seems like the guys and gals that are on that discipline committee ought to be the ones that are above reproach, because otherwise it feels a little bit like hypocrisy.
As I also learned after, I didn't check, but I also understand some of the judges on the list. There's a list of 56 of them, and that's not counting the senior judges, which is a whole different ballywick. But of those, some of the 56 are actually on the Supreme Court's Ethics Commission.
Oh my goodness! Something else you pointed out. I didn't know this, and I've been a DA, man. It is a crime to not file these things. It is an actual crime.
Willingly. You got to the law, willingly. I mean, if it's, ignorance is no excuse, but unless you actually knew you weren't filing. But that's why we point out in the story that they get an annual reminder from the Judicial Department, a 6-page letter in the emails that tells them, hey, you need to remember to file all these different documents this year. Don't forget. So it's not like they're not being nudged.
No. In my mind, I'm thinking to myself, one, what DA would have the guts to file against one of the judges in their jurisdiction? And where the hell could you file it, right? Does the violation occur in Denver where it should have been filed? Or does it?
No, it's actually the Attorney General that would that handles these cases, because it's generally against the bench.
Is that true? There's no jurisdiction for DAs?
Yeah. No, it's what the AG told me.
So we need Phil.
We need Mr. Weiser. That's right. And apparently the complainant could be either you or I, but it's really the Secretary of State. And they have said all along that they don't police it, but if someone makes the complaint to them, they will look it up and then they will file the complaint. So is that happening now? I have no idea.
Are you considered a complaint because of this great article?
Under certain rules by certain organizations, yes. And that would be the Discipline Commission. What they're doing anything about it, I have no idea. But that's how that whole inquiry into Justice Coates opened up, is when I broke those stories about him, and they took that as the complaint.
This is interesting to me because now that it's been brought to their attention, I'm not even sure that why they would need a formal complaint. I mean, what other area of the world can you say, here's a crime that's being committed, and the people charged with enforcing it say, well, until somebody shows up to really complain, like till someone shows up to claim the dead body in the street as a valued life, we're just not going to investigate the murder. This is really interesting. And then again, I want to ask Phil this question, buddy, are you at least reaching out to these people to say, hey, we're looking into this, to just give them the fear? But then what do you do? If you're Phil, you file this where? Does it get filed in Denver District Court and now you're appearing before the colleagues of all of these people?
Yeah, pretty interesting, isn't it?
What in the hell is going on here? There are I know some of the names on this list, and the responses from the judges and non-responses are interesting. Talk about those.
Well, I'd like to say that we got everything from, oh, I'm sorry, my oversight. Oh, I could have done better. Oh, I had an operation, to the equivalent of the dog ate my homework. I didn't, I was joking about that when I was with my spouse as I was working on this story, saying, boy, I've got every excuse under the sun here except the dog ate my homework. And then that one showed up within a week. I said, boy, oh boy, I can't believe it. I got it all on this one. But the question really is, and that's why we quote this one judge very early in the piece who says, look, it just doesn't matter what excuse I could give you. I mean, it doesn't matter. This is my fault. I have an obligation as a judge to get it right. This is Judge Tom Flesher out of the 10th Judicial District.
Yeah.
And he said, look, the requirement is to make sure the system has a great deal of integrity, and I don't want to impact that system in a bad way. So it's my fault. I can't give you any excuse other than it's my fault. And that's great. He fell on the sword. But you got to wonder, though, if I was a defendant standing in front of any one of these judges and I say, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I simply forgot. I'm not quite sure how what would go.
We're talking with Dave Migoya, super investigative reporter from the Denver and Colorado Springs Gazette. The reason this happens, and you were right to bring up that elected officials and a whole bunch of other folks that are even appointed to positions like Para, they have to file these quarterly disclosures, and there's annual disclosures too. And in fact, if you receive,
these are the annual ones we're talking about, George. Only the annuals.
But the reason they're not detected before you got into
That's a good point. You're right. Nobody's policing the judges when it comes to this. Hell, nobody was doing it to the U.S. Supreme Court until ProPublica on Clarence Thomas's business. So, I don't disagree with you that that's important. I think there's still an obligation, even if it's the Secretary of State, for somebody to at least acknowledge that, yes, you filed it this year. No, you haven't. And here's a reminder that you need to. No one's actually policing that law, and that's part of the exposure of this story.
Well, this is the quote from your article that gets me, and that is a Secretary of State spokesman said that the office, quote, investigates campaign and political finance violations based on complaints. Only after receiving a complaint does the department investigate and take action as appropriate. That's pretty lame. Right? Like, we can know something bad is happening, but we're never going to be proactive. It only happens if somebody complains to us about it. That just seems like a lame standard. Here's the other thing. The performance review commissions that you've written about and you've talked about, why in the hell aren't they checking these things? Like, they're writing glowing reviews of people that you've written in this article have been retained on the bench, and they've never filed a disclosure.
The performance commissions are very clear. As Kent Wagner runs the state, and he basically said, if it's not in the statute for us to look at, that it gives us the authority to do it, we don't do it. And it doesn't say in there, shall look at all manner of financial disclosure. Don't also forget, judges also have to sign a form that says, yes, I'm running for retention. Nowhere in that form does it say, yes, I'm up to date on all the laws that I'm obligated to follow? So there's no check anywhere.
This again cries out for some sort of legislative intervention. I presume the judicial branch would say, whoa, you can't tell us how to do our business. But at some point here, this self-regulation of an entire branch of government continues to prove itself to be less than optimal. I mean, the thing you started off with, Dave, the transparency piece, is undeniable if we're going to have any say at all in whether or not someone gets to be a judge at every level. I mean, we're talking county court, district court. It covers juvenile cases. We're talking a court of appeals. In your article, you have court of appeals members that haven't been filing these things.
That's right. We had one, Elizabeth Harris, who was one of both of the judges, Judge Fair and Judge Harris, were both on the tribunal that sat in judgment of our former Chief Justice Nathan Coates. And in Judge Harris's case, about 2 or 3 weeks before we went to press on the story, she had said, well, I'll check it out. Thanks for telling me, and I'll correct it if there's any problem. I hadn't heard back from her. I emailed her twice to find out, what had happened. What did you learn on your own inquiry with Secretary of State? I got no response. She might have been on vacation, I'll admit, but I got no response. And so I checked the day before the story ran with the Secretary of State, and they said, nope, still haven't gotten anything from Judge Harris. She's still missing those 2 years.
This is tough. Some of the names that you've got in here as being violators of
big names.
They're big names, and they're people I know, man. I know as off the bench and before they were judges. Some of them I get the responsibility as theirs, but some of them you discovered they had just put the wrong email address on by a letter or something else, and they think they're sending them, but they're not. I get it. It's their responsibility. Those don't bug me as much, but you've got someone who I was friends with in the DA's office, and I have such tremendous respect for, but the chief judge out of Boulder, who I'm a huge fan of, you don't have her filing one for 7 years.
Yeah, she had the largest, and that's Judge Bakke. She's the one that's handling the King Super Shooter case, and she had the largest gap in filing a number of years. Yeah,
I've tried cases with Ingrid, and she is great people, but I mean, there's something, I don't know what the fix is here, but it feels like every one of your articles is kind of a flare for the legislature to say it's now time to intervene here and do something. In any of the questions that you've asked of the judicial branch, has anyone said, hey, we're going to fix this, or this is our answer to this?
No, and the judicial branch has been very careful to point out that each judge, especially district judge, is a constitutional officer. They are all independent, so there isn't one any more authoritative than another. District judge, chief judges are merely the chief administrator, so they don't have any more authority over the other judges except perhaps scheduling and things like that. So they don't tell or interpret the law for the judges. It's up to the judge to determine for themselves whether or not they're going to follow the law and file these documents.
I'm still fascinated with the procedural concept of the Secretary of State refusing to take action until anybody makes a complaint, and then they send it on to the AG's office. And then what, right? Is the AG's office going to be like, I mean, because they have to appear in front of these judges every freaking day. I mean, they're the ones that go to the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court to defend DA cases that turn into convictions. I mean, how awkward is this particular setup? I mean, what have you discovered anything about how other states address this?
No, in fact, from what I understand, all the other states don't. They have a policing method where their Secretary of State is obligated by law. Ours is not, but they're obligated by law to confirm and check that these filings are actually happening and remind these elected officials or appointed officials that they have to make these filings. Our law, that's why our Secretary of State's office says that that's not their function. Their function is merely to gather these documents and be the library, so to say, of them, so that the public can come in and take a look. Now, that's also an interesting point, because my story also pointed out that we have this whole sector of judges known as senior judges. These are the guys and ladies that retire but want to keep working part-time, so to speak, and are able to kind of improve their pension by putting in additional work.
Yep.
And so here they are. They're actually still a functioning judge, just not so much as before. but they'll do 90 days of work in any number of cases. I pointed out how and they handle everything from felonies, misdemeanors, civil matters, family court, doesn't matter. And pretty much the same as any other judge. The law is very clear that any judge in any jurisdiction is required to file these disclosures. All 50, I saved for one, so 49 of 50 of our senior judges have not filed these disclosures with the Secretary of State. Instead, their contract to be a senior judge says they have to file them with the state court administrator. Nobody knows that unless you look at the contract. So we go to the state court administrator to get copies of a couple of these disclosures to prove that they're there, and it cost us $53 for 25 pages. You went to the Secretary of State, and it cost us nothing.
Well, how do they do an end run around the law by saying for the senior judges, you don't have to go to the Secretary of State?
They've never offered me a valid explanation. I asked for a law. I've asked for any piece of legislation, a court case, a Chief Justice directive, anything that would be able to show that senior judges are not required to file with the Secretary of State. And they could prove and provide none. They didn't provide. They wouldn't provide. So I just sort of shrugging my shoulders going, all right, well, we've got, 4 dozen of these guys sitting up there, and ladies. We've got some of them hadn't even filed their disclosures for years before they even retired. We've got another fellow that's been sitting as a senior judge for 16 years and has never filed a disclosure with the Secretary of State since he retired.
This is unbelievable.
Yet he's sitting on the bench all these years.
By the way, sitting on the bench, passing on some cases and sentencing on some cases that are as seemingly small and administrative as these violations as well. That's crazy. Something else, though, that you pointed out, and we're running thin on time here, but something else that you pointed out when you highlighted the Center for Public Integrity, they looked at our laws on this and said, but even if the judges comply, they're not required to give disclosures about how much they're invested in X, Y, or Z.
That's right. Yeah. It's a range of dollar amounts, anything over 5,000, but you don't have to give the particulars. So let's be clear here. It's not just the financial disclosure of the judge. It's the disclosure of what the judge's spouse or partner is involved in, as well as their kids. So it has a broad degree of latitude here. And if you're not filing, it's not like we don't know what the judge is up to. We also don't know what his family's up to.
Well, man, this is incredible stuff, especially in light of the thumping that Clarence Thomas has taken over some of the things that he's done. I'm not sure you can tease us with what's next, but what's next, Dave?
I got a couple of little things in the hopper. I'm happy to say that the next story up does not involve our judiciary. And I'm sure right now, if any judges are listening, they're throwing the confetti in the air.
I think they just sighed relief. I mean, the problem that you've run into, and me for having you on to discuss this, is neither one of us can show up as defendants in court in the near term. I mean, there has to be some change.
Well, I wasn't going to do that anyway, George.
Yeah, so as you know, sometimes you don't actually have to have done anything wrong to end up there. It just, from time to time, things happen and mistakes get made and you end up in court. And representing you in court would be fun, because my guess is every judge you appear in front of, you'd say, hey, I need you to recuse because you've shown up in one of Dave's articles. You may be prosecution proof.
Yeah, I suppose that'd be possible. Boy, thanks for that. I'm not really willing to test that theory. But,
exactly.
I like it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, David Migoya, super investigative reporter for the Gazette. Once again, fantastic piece. This is big deal. This should lead to some changes in the law, or how about just enforcement of the existing law?
I had heard and have been asking that many of the judges have begun scrambling to catch up with their missed filings, to be up to date. But it's sort of like stealing a candy bar. Well, I don't like using the word stealing, but leaving the store with an unpaid for candy bar, and you get outside and you go, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. And you bring it back, it's a little hard to undo the problem. You can put the candy bar back, you can file your disclosures, but the fact is, the issue still remains.
Yeah, it does. I think the other thing that's a bit embarrassing for voters too is this is an unenforced hollow law and ain't nobody checking. It's almost like nobody cares to see whether these judges have given appropriate disclosures or what the disclosures show. I mean, nobody's scrutinizing this stuff. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you. I think at the minimum, what we should see is that there's some mechanism, because these are all filed electronically, that sends back an affirmation that a judge did file, and that there's some mechanism that reminds each judge a week after the deadline or a day after the deadline that you've missed your deadline, you need to file. Somebody in judicial needs to be tracking all of this.
Do you know what happens when you're an attorney, Dave? If you fail to get in things like, like the little things, like you get your CLE, your continuing legal education hours in on time, or you fail to indicate that you don't owe any child support and stuff like that, they just simply suspend you from the practice of law. I don't know why we don't do that for the bench, right? You don't get your disclosure filed, you're suspended. You're no longer an attorney. My guess is lottie-dottie, everybody files that thing on time.
Yeah, I can't imagine judges being suspended from the bench. Can you think of?
No.
Wow.
No. Well, not under the current climate, which is one where it seems like self-regulation has led to sort of sloth in following the rules and the regulations. And what really bothers me is the sort of double standard that exists for all other attorneys out there. Fail to file, you get suspended. If you're a judge, fail to file for years, and you get an email from Dave Migoya that you don't respond to.
Well, thanks, George. I appreciate always the confidence and certainly talking about it. It's important for anybody that didn't see it at denvergazette.com. You can just look it up and run my name, and you'll see all the different stories that we've been writing about. It's the first thing that pops up
when you Google search Migoya and Gazette. This is the thing that shows up on the top. It says, despite law, 1 in 6 Colorado judges doesn't have financial disclosures filed, some for years. And then from there, you just got to read this thing. It's a lot longer than you think it is, but every paragraph you go, what?
That's all right. It's the old saying. I used to work at the Detroit Free Press years ago, and we used to say, sure, it's 90 inches, but it reads like 20. So.
Dave Migoya, go Yanks, man. Fingers crossed that they turn it around.
No, go España. My girls are in the finals, man. I was talking to your boy Bill off air, and let me tell you, I am excited.
You and the soccer guy here behind the glass. Good gravy, man. We'll have to have you on. If they pull this thing off, we'll have you on for a little celebratory lap on the radio.
That would be spectacular. But you know what stinks? I have DirecTV, and they don't carry Fox 31. So I tried to tape the semifinal. I turned it on. I looked, and I went, what? And I got a big black and white screen saying, they're in a contract dispute. And I'm thinking, I know what all the people that can't watch the Avalanche on Comcast and the other.
You're going to have to go back to
terrible.
Antenna TV.
I can't watch my game.
Dave Migoya, good luck to you, the team, mostly the Yanks. We'll talk with you soon, my friend.
All right. Thanks, George. Be good.
Thanks, sir. Hey, that's David Migoya. Check out his article there at the Gazette. You can check out Gazette.com. Just search Migoya and Gazette. You'll get this thing, number one. Just crazy stuff that this guy finds. And it's not like this one took a lot of heavy lifting in terms of he just looked. And there it wasn't. And then he went from there. I just wish, I don't know. This is the kind of stuff that leads to the kinds of changes that we need. This isn't a reflection on the bench in terms of their character. And I don't feel that way. I feel like this is a branch that has been left to police itself. And I think it's showing it's struggling to do that. And we're going to help them get to the right place. Hey, when we come back, your calls, your texts, 303-696-1971. We'll continue the conversation until we get to the top of the 9. And then we're going to be joined by Sadie Gurman, also fantastic reporter with local roots for the Wall Street Journal. She covers all the Trump stuff. Stick around. George Brauchler, 710 KNUS. George Brauchler back with you here, 710 KNUS. My thanks to Dave Migoya. Continues to hit it out of the park there for the Gazette. You can check out his work at the Gazette or at gazette.com. Just Google Gazette and Migoya. It'll take you there. Now, listen, let me tell you, it's going to say something like subscriber content. Subscribe, man. It's not expensive at all. And if you're going to do something online, local, you only have a couple choices, and the Gazette is the best one. So, you know what? Why don't they advertise on this damn show, Billy? Why don't we have Chelsea, if you're out there, or Travis or Mark, pretty pleased with, advertising dollars on top. Reach out to these guys.
But my guess is things like the spider conversation earlier in the morning.
Oh,
yeah. I'm just guessing, that some of these advertisers
story, the discussion was one thing, but the story about the Viagra spider.
Yes, exactly. See, I think, because brands, they want safety. They want security. And I'm not so certain that that's always what we're delivering, but we have fun.
What's the name of that spider again, if I wanted to go buy one?
Brazilian wandering spider.
It's so interesting that it's Brazilian.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. And again, you'd have to go back to the 6 o'clock hour to join us and to figure out why this is so funny about the Brazilian wandering spider. Because when it bites you, there's a very unique side effect. That happens almost all the time.
You walk into a doctor's office and you say, Doc, I think I've been bit by a spider. They just look at you and go, Brazilian wandering spider. And you're like, how do you know?
Yeah, how'd you know this? Yes.
Well, it is what it is.
It is.
Now, listen, there's something. It's a conversation I want to start with you. I just don't know that we can do the whole thing justice in the limited time that we have here. And by the way, happy to take calls on the state of the bench here in Colorado. And I can't emphasize this enough. In no way do I think that these things are indicative of a bench that lacks the character and the intellect to do the job well and follow the law and enforce law. That's not it at all. I think what we're seeing, and it could have been anything else in government, but I think what we're seeing is this is what happens when you have a bench that is responsible solely for policing itself, right? Like we talk about checks and balances in state government all the time, but what we've seen is there just aren't enough checks on one branch of government that up until Dave Migoya has really, I think, taken it for granted that they're all doing the things that they should be doing. I mean, that's just what's happened here. And you've had a certain mindset of, hey, we need to protect the brand. And so certain things don't happen under the prior administration. And all of a sudden that turns into a discipline issue that nobody can ever remember happening before. And then you talk about, there's misconduct by some judges, a handful of judges on the bench. And that misconduct is kept secret, not just from the public, but from the Judicial Performance Review Commission. We find out that the Judicial Performance Review Commission is handcuffed into looking only at a couple of specifically delineated through a statute things. And we find out that that's junk. We shouldn't be doing that. There should be virtually no limits on what a performance review commission can look at in recommending a judge to you or I. We find out that disclosure requirements that are kept in check by your political opponents doesn't apply to the judicial branch. We find out we have a Secretary of State's office that can know firsthand now, because they've looked at it, to see that judges are not doing their jobs and filing these disclosures. And yet they say, well, we're not going to do anything until someone complains. Well, why the hell doesn't Jenna Griswold complain? Why doesn't she just file the complaint as a citizen of the state of Colorado who, oh, by the way, happens to be the Secretary of State? You think this would happen if these were, if Dave Migoya's article was only Republican judges have failed to file these disclosures, if there were such a way to determine that? You think for a moment it would take Dave Migoya to gin up the Secretary of State's office to beg off of why they've been inactive this whole time? I mean, I want to see a complaint filed, not because I have anything against these individual judges. I don't. I have something against the sloth that would put them in a position to continue to function in these capacities with this massive authority that they have and the respect that they demand and in just about every case deserve. And they do it with impunity here. They just fail to follow the law. They're in the job of law, right? That's their thing. But why isn't the Secretary of State on her own ginning this up? Why doesn't the press secretary who told Dave, hey, we only respond to complaints, why doesn't that cat do it? I mean, this is kind of crazy. We're inept. We're powerless to do anything unless somebody comes forward and points out what we know, and that is judges aren't following the law. And the reason we need that to happen is because then they take it, and it sounds like they don't exercise any discretion in it. They just put together the package and send it over to Professor Phils. I want the Attorney General to take responsibility for this and have to make some decisions about how to move forward. And then we get to ask the Attorney General, what did you do and why? Are they going to file charges? I cannot believe, by the way, that the Attorney General has the sole discretion for this. Why the hell does the Attorney General need to rely on the Secretary of State to move forward on violations of the law that are misdemeanors, just misdemeanors, against judges? This dude, in my opinion, this guy, Phil, wants to become the governor of the state of Colorado and then ultimately, I don't know, appointed to the Supreme Court. I don't know if it's of the state or of the U.S., but this guy wants to wear a robe and he loves to be loved by judges, even though he never, ever, never appears in front of them for any purpose other than to get smacked down on a Supreme Court argument that he makes, defending, by the way, a case that got successfully convicted under my administration. But here we are, knowing that there are judges out there that have committed misdemeanor crimes, They have willfully not filed after having been notified every year, and ain't nobody done anything about it. You talk about a two-tiered justice system here. It isn't Republican, Democrat. Once again, and it's not even just money. Once again, it is power versus the powerless. If you're in the right position in government, it's wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And again, I'm not criticizing any specific judge. What I'm saying is we have allowed a system, and if they're being honest with you, if the judges would ever, half of them didn't even respond to Dave, if they're being honest with you, they would admit, you're right, things have gotten lax, and it's embarrassing. You want to hear every judge go, my God, this is embarrassing. But all of these checks that we put on attorneys, I'm telling you, you don't pay. If you don't pay, just simply pay your stupid bar annual fee every year, you don't practice law. You don't certify that you don't have any child support obligations and that you're compliant with them. You don't get to practice law. You don't get your dumb CLE requirements done every 3 years. You don't practice law. You get suspended. All of those seemingly picayune things have nothing, absolutely nothing to do with the public's ability to check on you and your performance and exercise of big state powers. But when it comes to transparency with the bench and having to do these public disclosures of this financial stuff, we've got folks getting retained on the bench who are getting glowing reviews from the Judicial Performance Review Commission who ain't never complied with the law. Huh? Misdemeanor crimes. You think if Billy had to file some sort of paperwork on something to hold down this job and it didn't happen, you think someone's just going to be like, oh, well. What are the other misdemeanor laws that you think you would just get it's okay. It's all right. I get it. And the questions to Dave were legit. And I got to cut away here for a break, but this whole thing is starting to piss me off. Every time I talk to Migoya, I get upset. If it's not about the Yankees, it's about the state of an entire branch of government that I have worked with now for 28 years. I have friends and professional colleagues who are on the bench. And I don't understand this monk-like silence to protect the brand. These folks ought to be coming out in public. They're constitutional officers. No judge can remove them. They ought to be coming out and saying, we demand more accountability from our colleagues. We demand more compliance with the law from our colleagues. These are misdemeanor crimes. That should have been the title. Not 1 in 6 Colorado judges doesn't have a financial disclosure. 1 in 6 Colorado judges is breaking the law, is violating a misdemeanor law. Man, I don't know what the hell's going on here, but I can tell you this. Mitch Floria is wonderful. I don't have a good segue for Mitch other than, if Mitch didn't file the appropriate paperwork with the Secretary of State's office for his company, it would be found delinquent. And that's what it would show up like on the website. But Mitch Floria never has to deal with that because this dude isn't just a guy who's compliant with the law. He is enthusiastic about being an American, and he thrives in this highly regulated environment because this guy brings to the table the things that aren't required by government, but they're required by good citizens and good businessmen, and that is customer service. Mitch Floria overachieves when it comes to not just installing beautiful art-like countertops in your bathroom or your kitchen. This guy meets you where you want to be met, and that is face-to-face handshake. You go to his showroom out there at the corner of about 6th Avenue and Colfax, and when you talk to Mitch, bring the credit card because it's happening. You're going to close the deal with this guy. There is nobody else out there that does this kind of work that's going to make you feel as appreciated and trusted as this guy. His folks go out there and knock it out of the park every single day in a way that the Yankees apparently can't. All you have to do to get the benefit of that is to reach out to Mitch. First off, learn about him at theartofgranite.com. But then when you go meet with them or you call them up, you say, hey, I'm a George listener. I'm a 710 KNUS listener. Hey, you get the kitchen countertop sink. You get the sink for free with the kitchen countertop. Or if you're doing your bathroom as well, he'll throw in the bathroom countertop for free with the kitchen countertop package. And you're also getting the wholesale prices. Give him a call, 303-386-5919, 303-386-5919. Going to cut away from a break. We'll have seconds left, and then we're going to be joined by the Wall Street Journal's Sadie Gurman, George Brauchler, 710 KNUS.
Imagine the lifelong impact of a journey to the Holy Land, surrounded by like-minded travelers. Picture yourself stepping foot in iconic locations right out of history. With nationally syndicated radio hosts Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher, you'll gain firsthand understanding of the spiritual and political importance of this vital region.
Hi, it's Mike Gallagher here. I hope you'll join Dennis Prager and me on an amazing journey through Israel in October 2023.
Discover Israel's vibrant culture and why this nation is such a strategic partner for the United States. Join Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher on this life-enriching Israel tour, October 25th through November 3rd, 2023. For more information, call 855-565-5519 or visit standwithisraeltour.com.
George Brauchler back with you, 710 KNUS. Only seconds left in the show. Sorry about that little, vomiting diatribe there, but a lot of this just takes place inside that broken gray matter that sits between my ears. While I'm talking about it, I get more and more incensed, like, what the hell is going on here? We get distracted by a lot of national stuff, but this local stuff, man, the legislature needs to step in and fix what another branch won't fix themselves. I'm just not sure we're going to see it, not with these folks in power. They love them, some of the judges, to the exclusion of the transparency piece, apparently. We'll talk about it more. Hey, listen, when we come back, Sadie Gurman, local reporter, but now big time with the Wall Street Journal. She's going to join us. Stick around. George Brauchler, 710 KNUS. George Brauchler back with you here. Final hour of the Wednesday show, halfway through the week, halfway through the month, 710 KNUS. Happy, proud, thrilled to bring up on the line with us right now, super reporter. She is the Justice Reporter. I think that's the right title. Local roots right here. Sadie Gurman from the Wall Street Journal. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. It's so good to talk to you.
I know. It's been a long time. First off, what is your title?
I cover the Justice Department.
That's the federal level stuff, but I've noticed you've been writing, including like today, something that got published on the local stuff as well. Are you covering all things DJT?
Well, I mean, I think it's hard to avoid covering the local case when it is so closely related to the same facts, has a lot of the same facts that are being alleged by Special Counsel Jack Smith as well. So, I mean, I feel like, once you start covering this stuff, it's very hard to get out of it.
Can we do this for folks that don't remember the great work you did here? First off, tell everybody where you grew up and your connections here to the local community.
Yeah, so I grew up near Cherry Creek Reservoir. I went to Cherry Creek High School. I was class of 2003. I started that we just had our 20th high school reunion. I went to then I went to the University of Missouri and for journalism school, and then started working at local papers elsewhere. But I moved back in 2012 and worked at the Denver Post, and then I worked at the AP in Denver, and the AP moved me to Washington, D.C., and now I work for the Wall Street Journal covering DOJ.
Are you in D.C. still? Is that where you operate out of?
Yes, that's right. I'm right in downtown Washington.
Now, when you have covered this, there's some things that you've done, and you're on podcasts and stuff too, Wall Street Journal stuff, but there's some great stuff you've been putting out there, very comprehensive. You get into the details as well. When we look at what is taking place with the two federal indictments, the one for Mar-a-Lago down in Miami, and then the one about January 6th up in D.C., they're spearheaded by a guy who I think everybody wants to think they know, a guy named Jack Smith. He's the prosecutor, but you did a deeper dive on his background. Tell us, who is this guy? Where does he come from? What's his story?
Well, certainly he is well known within the Justice Department, but I think he's less well known outside of legal circles. He is somebody who is a longtime federal prosecutor. He's a former war crimes prosecutor, and he is also a public corruption prosecutor. He notably worked in the Justice Department's Public Integrity Section. That's the unit that handles corruption cases on both the local, state, and also the national level. So, crime, charges against politicians, senators, lawmakers, political figures, and also in some cases police officers and prosecutors. And it was in that time period that we really saw him taking sort of a broad view of federal law as it relates to corruption. We saw him, he was a prosecutor, he was overseeing the unit when prosecutors charged Senator John Edwards, and notably with a sort of novel campaign finance case that ultimately fell apart, and he was acquitted. We also saw Smith's prosecutors during this time charge and convict former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell, but that conviction was, of course, overturned by the Supreme Court, which basically raised the bar for what can be considered federal criminal conduct at a federal level when it relates to corruption. So basically, the Supreme Court in that case said that Smith's prosecutors had taken such a broad view of corruption, that it could basically include, constituent service and other sort of routine political business that may be, messy, but not criminal.
And that was not a close call vote by the Supreme Court.
No, it was unanimous. It was unanimous 8-0.
Now, one of the things that you talked about was this guy joins this public integrity. It had some acronym. I can't remember what it was. If I say public integrity group, then it's PIG, but it's not PIG. It was something else.
It's PIN, the Public Integrity Section, but it's known as PIN.
That's so weird. But he actually became a little controversial at the front end of his leadership of that unit. Why did that happen?
Well, so he came onto that unit when it was still reeling from the loss of its case against Senator Ted Stevens. This was a case in which prosecutors had basically withheld discovery evidence from the defense.
Oh, it was bloody. It was bloody. Yeah.
Yes. So it was, and actually, I think one of the young prosecutors on the case killed himself following that. And Eric Holder had basically, ordered this case to be dismissed And so this was a very tough time for Penn. But Smith started there, and he was asked to go through some of their very long-running investigations to see if they should continue to be pursued or if he should close them out. And so he actually closed a lot of investigations into political figures of both parties, and that prompted some criticism that the unit under his leadership had gone soft. But he strongly rejected that assertion, and in fact worked to build the team's trial skills. So, he upped their court work and he improved their ability to take cases in court. And we saw an uptick in public corruption cases coming out of that unit shortly after he arrived.
Now, with Edwards and McDonald, those are two kind of high-profile black eyes to take on behalf of the unit that he led. You've had a chance to interview a bunch of people inside and outside DOJ. What is this guy's reputation as a prosecutor?
Well, Attorney General Garland chose him because he is viewed as an apolitical figure. What we saw coming out of the public corruption unit at that time were cases against Republicans and Democrats. And so, Justice Department officials point to that track record to show that he's not showing any favor to any side. He's a registered independent, and, he was trusted as somebody who is both, knowledgeable of how to do this kind of work and yet also willing to take challenges and unafraid. This is his reputation within the Justice Department. He's someone who, even by his own account, is not afraid to lose. If he believes the evidence is there, he is willing to take a case to court. And so that's what we're seeing in these two cases against Donald Trump. These are both historic and unprecedented cases. And so by that virtue, the theories involved here are also novel and unprecedented. So the facts are new, so are the theories, and it's an open question how a jury and a court are going to view that.
He strikes me as fearless, but he also strikes me as particularly aggressive, and maybe that's, indicated by his novel approach to how he's applying some of these fraud laws, whether it's to McDonald or anybody else. Is that consistent with the sense of him from the legal community that you've spoken to? Is that this guy is really aggressive and fearless in this?
I think that's right. Certainly different people have different opinions, but I think that's a pretty reasonable assertion. And I think that most people in the legal circle here agree that the likelihood of Trump being indicted went up exponentially when Garland appointed Smith, because Garland was really, Smith does not have to, as a special counsel, take into account political considerations like, is an indictment going to divide the country? Are we just too, are we just in too much of a political firestorm that this would actually make the situation worse? Like, he doesn't have to consider that stuff. And he is known, from talking to former colleagues, he is known as somebody who, once he has a target, if he feels the evidence is there, he will bring charges.
We're talking with Sadie Gurman. She is the top-notch justice reporter for the Wall Street Journal. When you look at these two prosecutions, I look at them very differently. Like, this is me, the legal guy. I assess the Miami Mar-a-Lago one as very tactical, very clean, conservative, smart. I don't see admissibility issues with the evidence that jump out from the indictment. That, to me, looks like a super targeted one. This one up in D.C. seems far more ambitious, broad, and novel. Do you know which of these is going to go first? And if we're talking timeline here, as we look, November of 24 is only 10 minutes from now. How do these things get done before voters start casting their ballots?
Well, it's not clear to me that they will be done before voters start casting their ballots. It is remarkable to think that these four, we have the Georgia cases, the two federal cases, and then, of course, the New York case, all starting within, scheduled to start at least within months of each other. And it's an open question to me how Trump is going to be able to juggle campaign events with courtroom fights. And also with Willis's case in particular, there are so many defendants, that scheduling is going to be hard. And every one of these defendants is going to press to have their case delayed. And you're going to see that on the federal level, too. The other issue is that there are so many witnesses, and many of these witnesses overlap in both cases. And so getting them to be available for testimony is going to be challenging. So this is all just a very unprecedented situation that we're finding ourselves in, where prosecutors from Smith's office are really going to have to work with Willis's office. And it's not clear to me that they've been doing that up until this point. To be able to sort of coordinate this and, make sure that they have everything, that their own cases are come first. And I think both of these prosecutors would like to see their case come first.
Speaking of coordination, and I've heard this on some other shows and read about it on some websites and stuff, do you detect any evidence that there was coordination in either the investigations or the charging between the state and the federal folks, between Jack Smith's team and either Fanni Willis or anyone else?
She dodged a question about that the other day, and it's not clear to me that there has been actual coordination. I mean, if this was a case in which the federal government was considering bringing the exact same or very similar charges for the same conduct, there is a Justice Department policy that specifies that, federal prosecutors will let the state prosecutors go first. But that's not happening here. And the set of facts is not identical. So, I think at this point that they haven't really worked together. And according to the legal experts that I talked to just yesterday, they're going to have to get on the same page. And it's not clear to me that they are.
It's interesting because DA Willis has said she wants to try all 19 within 6 months, which you've been covering things both locally here in Colorado and at the national level. That's crack smoke crazy. I mean, even if the dude wasn't Donald Trump and running for president and didn't have 3 other prosecutions out there, I don't know how you pull that off at the state level. But then on top of that, you have Jack Smith saying, I think it's the January 6th case. He wants it started in January. Any idea how this plays out? I mean, if you had to guess which case goes first.
I don't know. I would expect that the federal case would go first because he brought it first, but that's really the only reason why I would make that guess. The other issue that we're already starting to see with Willis's case is that some of the defendants are petitioning to have their cases moved into a federal venue because they are saying that their conduct, people like Mark Meadows, Trump could do this too, where, the conduct alleged in the indictment pertains to his official duties. Meadows was acting as his chief of staff when he did all of the things that Willis is alleging that he did. And so he says by that token, it's a supremacy clause issue, and it should be handled in federal court. So that is another way that the case could be delayed. And, there's no way that she's going to be able to try all 19 defendants at the same time. She might not even be trying them in the same venue. So, her prosecutors are going to be handling these entire cases, but it's an open question of how and where and when.
I think that's news for people too. The idea that a state prosecution can be elevated to federal court. There is at least one that I'm aware of federal statute that permits that when the issues touch upon some of this stuff, or they're things that could have been brought by the feds. That is an interesting development if it happens. The other thing about being the justice reporter, though, is it isn't just Donald Trump all the time. There's a guy out there whose name rhymes with Hunter Biden, who is also seemingly caught up in a bunch of different investigations and looks at by the feds. What can you tell us? What's the update on what's going on with Hunter Biden's cases? If there are cases, I don't know what we call them, but.
Yeah, the Hunter Biden case has been stunning. Basically, less than a month ago, we in the press corps thought that Hunter Biden was going to successfully plead guilty to a pair of misdemeanor tax offenses and enter into an agreement by which prosecutors would not charge him on a separate felony gun offense. But during a stunning court hearing on July 26th, we saw this totally implode. Basically, prosecutors and defense attorneys were not on the same page about the deal and what it entailed, specifically the scope of the immunity that it guaranteed Hunter from prosecution, potential future prosecution for crimes. And we heard a stunning revelation from prosecutors in court that Hunter Biden remains under investigation for and could face additional criminal charges for things like related to his foreign lobbying work. So this case, which we thought was about to be buttoned up, is in fact been prolonged and magnified, just as his dad is campaigning for re-election. So now we have a special counsel another special counsel, but this is David Weiss, the longtime U.S. attorney who has been investigating this case for 5 years. And so it's, they're escalating their court fight now. They're trying to get this case moved out of Delaware to a different venue, like California, where Hunter Biden was living at the time when this conduct took place. And so it's just been a crazy, crazy summer.
Now, the Republicans were screaming for a while, we want a special prosecutor, want a special prosecutor. And then when Merrick Garland appointed David Weiss, who you've described as the guy that's been handling this thing for 5 years, Trump appointed U.S. attorney in Delaware, they were also screaming, like, not that guy. We want a different guy. What's the controversy from their standpoint about David Weiss?
Well, I think the argument that they are making is that this was the same prosecutor that oversaw the botched plea deal, and has had this case for so long, and this is how it ended up. And so he's maybe not the right person for that. But from where Garland sits, Garland has promised David Weiss broad independence from the start. And so he's been operating largely autonomously, even without the special counsel designation. But when Weiss came to him last week and said that he thought his investigation had reached a point where he needed that special counsel status, Garland's hands were a little bit tied in terms of, telling him that he couldn't do that. The optics of telling him that he couldn't do that or putting somebody else in his place, I think would have been potentially worse than just allowing Weiss, who's very familiar with the case, to see it through. Plus, it wasn't Garland's idea to appoint him special counsel. He hadn't given him that designation. Weiss requested it. So it's just, it's kind of a no-win, I think, for the attorney general.
Is the other thing I've heard is the controversy with that is when the Comer-led committee would have asked Weiss to come in and testify and answer questions about, hey, what discretion were you given? What was your conversation with, Merrick Garland on this? Were you allowed to do this? Which U.S. attorney shut you down? That all goes away because now that he's still involved in an active investigation as the special counsel, his office gets to say, and rightfully so, I can't come in and talk about this because I'm in the middle of it. That's another piece that I've heard.
That's true. So this basically extends the investigation. Weiss had said that he was prepared to come in and talk in September or October, but now he can't do that. The Justice Department just sent a letter to Republican lawmakers saying, however, that basically they would be bound from talking about an open investigation if it were led by a U.S. attorney or a special counsel. But the fact is that, the Oversight Committee was just beginning to make some progress in terms of scheduling something with him when they decided to prolong this. So that is definitely a criticism.
Sadie Gurman, justice reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Listen, I'd love to continue to have you on a regular basis, but more than that, if you ever come back in town to visit the family or your old stomping grounds of some high school called Cherry Creek or something, I'd love to have you in studio and have this conversation in person.
Yeah, that would be great. We should definitely at least get together for a cup of coffee.
For sure. How can people find your great work?
Well, you can visit our website at www.wsj.com. And if you go to my author page, like if you find one of my stories, click my byline, and then you can read all of my stories.
Honestly, I just Googled Gurman, Gurman, WSJ, and I got right there. And then it has a list of all your most recent work, which is just fantastic. Sadie Gurman, justice reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. Sure.
See you, Sadie. Hey, that was great. I love that interview. What did you hear there? What questions do you have? There's something else, by the way, about the prosecution. You listen, I want to answer your questions and I want to get your texts on this, but there is something I think we may just have time to start the conversation with. Billy found some sound that he and I heard yesterday that it warrants a conversation, folks. It's a concern. Here's another concern, and that is, why does my neck, my back, my elbows, my knees, my ankles, why do they keep hurting, and what can I do about it? You've heard me talk about QC Kinetix for a while now for a very good reason. They make getting pain-free easy and pain-free. Most of your regular docs out there are going to give you two choices. Well, three: live with it, take a whole bunch of pills, which nobody wants to do. And the other is, let's go see an orthopedic surgeon who's a brilliant surgeon, fantastic at fixing people, but that requires cutting you open, putting you back together. You get exposed to infection. There's downtime. There's rehabilitation. Why not just circumvent all that stuff and do an end run towards pain relief by doing QCkinetics.com? Go out to that website. Look at all the information there. If they don't answer all your questions on the website, here's the cool part. They have local medical experts who are willing to answer any and all of your questions before you sign up with them. Their number is 303-900-8986, 303-900-8986. Give them a call and ask them everything. Try to stump the QC Kinetics medical folks. And once you've become satisfied, sign up with them. Go get the regenerative medicine treatment. That's the cutting edge stuff that's going on out there that QC Kinetics has been delivering coast to coast, border to border for a while now with great success. That's QCkinetics.com. When we come back, barring a phone call on what you heard from Sadie Gurman, fantastic reporter. I love the interview. Barring any phone calls or texts on that, I'm going to talk to you about something involving a dude who comes on after me. His name is Charlie Kirk. George Brauchler, 710 KNUS.
Why should you buy your next vehicle at Castle Rock Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram? We make car shopping easy. We have a huge inventory of new and pre-owned vehicles. We can even custom order. We make it easy. Easy financing, friendly staff. And when it comes to quality service, our expert technicians keep your vehicle in top shape. Visit us today off of Highway 25 and Plum Creek, or shop online at castlerockcdjr.com. Castle Rock Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram. Car shopping made easy. Why should you buy your next vehicle?
George Brauchler back with you here, 710 KNUS. Thanks to Sadie Gurman, super justice reporter for the Wall Street Journal, obviously up to speed on far more than just what the feds are doing. We had a great conversation with her about not just the cases going on against DJT, but really Jack Smith, a little bit more information, and as well as where we may be going with the Hunter Biden cases. Those things, I think she's right. I think everybody thought that those things were going to be buttoned up and just go away, and now they're not anymore. One of the things I told you, there's some stuff I want to talk about that Charlie Kirk had on a show yesterday. I think we're going to save that. I just don't feel like we can have the full conversation until we have more time, because we only have these 2 segments left. And this is an interesting one. I'm just going to tell you, you want to go back and listen to the Charlie Kirk podcast from yesterday. It'll give you some sense of where we're going to go. I don't want to tease it more than that, but there's some interesting things that came up between he and a guest, and it made me wonder, well, what the hell are we doing? But that's what we'll talk about tomorrow. In the interim, Billy and I were having a conversation off the air, and this is the question I want to explore with you with the time that we have left. Do you want to see these cases resolved before the primary, before the general election, or do you think that they should just wait out there in the wings pending the outcome of the November 2024 election? I mean, it's an interesting question because, it's a double-edged sword. If he gets convicted of any of these charges, one, I don't think it costs him any of the Republican support that he has, maybe a vote here or there. I do think it could have an impact on unaffiliateds, but the bigger question is if you're convinced that Trump is innocent of these charges, that he's not guilty, don't you want them done before the primary, or the primary is kind of irrelevant at this point because the dude's going to run away with it. But before the general election, don't you want to know?
I'm glad you brought that up, George, because I've been thinking that this entire time. Every time we've seen Trump's lawyers try to push this back and even talk about the idea of having it after the election, the question I had is, if he really believes that he is innocent, then wouldn't you want to rush to trial to clear your name? I mean, if you were accused of something you didn't do, or I was accused of something we didn't do, I wouldn't want it lingering over me for a year and a half, 2 years, with all these other stories being written about, he's going to be prosecuted.
Right.
Because many of the people will not eventually see the results of the trial. They will have already made up their mind. I would want to be in the court tomorrow if you are accusing me of something I didn't do, because I want to walk in there and go, didn't do it. Here's the proof. What you going to do about it? Immediately.
303-696-1971 is the number. I agree with everything except here's the proof part. I still want the government to be 100% on the hook for proving his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, but I get the opportunity. And you say this every time you pick a jury as a prosecutor. Hey, they don't have to do anything. They can sit at that table and simply stare back at you, and nobody does that, right? Like nobody does that. And in this case, I simply can't imagine, either through robust cross-examination of government witnesses or the presentation of evidence that maybe the government has but didn't introduce or doesn't have, I can't imagine the Trump team just being like, they didn't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, thank you. I mean, they're going to put on some kind of a case. And one of the aspects of this, especially for the Georgia case, is the election stolen piece. And Billy, there was something that the president put out on Truth Social.
He did it
yesterday?
Yeah, it was yesterday. He did his truth yesterday. And some of it was in big capital letters, as he's wont to do. But he promised that on Monday, he is going to host a press conference at Mar-a-Lago during this very hour in which we are on right now.
Do we get to carry that live?
We sure will.
Right
if
on.
It is, as long as our CBS partner is carrying it. I understand. You don't like the CBS News at the top of the hour, but that's why we need to have CBS News, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to do things like this. We have to dance with the devil to get to these dance cards. So that's what we got to do. So he's going to announce, evidently, 11 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Mountain. He is going to drop a report that is irrefutable proof.
He said irrefutable?
Yes, he did. Of the Georgia election being stolen. So, one, I want to see if he does do this. I don't know if this is going to be another promise like Infrastructure Week is coming next week, or 2 weeks from now, he's going to drop his healthcare plan, which was always 2 weeks away. Strangely enough. Don't know how that worked out, but for 4 years, he was always 2 weeks away from the most beautiful healthcare plan ever. Now, the other question I've got is, dude, 2.5 years? You've been waiting on this? 3 years? You've had the information?
Listen, I'm interested in that too. We've also continued to hear from listeners and others that, all those documents that were seized up from Mar-a-Lago, that he had all the secrets in there, like against all the people in power and the FBI and elsewhere. And that's why they were so desperate to raid his place and get it all. And I asked the same question, like, why didn't you reveal it the day before or the month before? I mean, you knew they were coming. They told your attorneys, we're coming.
Yeah, especially after, and the key for me in that one is the subpoena. As soon as you get the subpoena, that should be the idea of, oh, they're serious and they're coming to get the stuff. They know I have the dirt on them. So now we're going to do this. And as we all know how journalism works, and even Trump knows this, he could have easily passed any of that information to a friendly reporter, and then he's got cover. And that's happened numerous times.
Or
in
not
our
even a
history.
reporter. Why not just do it through Twitter?
Yeah, he could, but it would provide him cover by doing it through the reporter. Reporter wouldn't have to necessarily be the source, but he could have done it, and it wasn't. And that should really give you pause in your mind as to whether or not those secrets actually exist, or if it's another smoke screen.
I want these cases to be resolved before he takes office. And I want to dismiss the New York one and say, I don't really care if that's resolved because it's so stupid. But I guess I want them all resolved because I think we deserve to know, right? And I think the problem is so many of us already think we know. Like, well, we saw the indictment. We know it's political. It was this Democrat DA from Georgia or this Democrat DA from New York. And it's like, yes, I get it. I want to hear it. I want to hear the damn case. That's the other thing. Georgia is going to get to be televised. Gotta happen, right? Like, gotta happen. That needs to happen in the federal courts too. This is ridiculous. You can't prosecute a guy who is very likely the nominee for president, who was the president, who could be the president. You can't prosecute that guy in a room and say the only people that get to see it live are the people that can fit in the room. That's stupid.
That is stupid. And let's do a callback to a caller earlier this week and participate in a casual thought experiment. Now, just for fun, let's walk through this thought experiment together. Let's say that instead of Donald J. Trump is the one being accused, let's just say that it is President Joe Biden. Now, I understand that we cannot indict a sitting president. I get that. But this is a thought experiment, so we can break those kind of rules.
I don't know if there's a rule against state prosecutors.
That's true. Maybe not state, but I know federal. So let's just pretend for a moment that we have a long list of bribery from China and Ukraine and self-dealing and everything that
phone calls.
And everything that James Comer has been alleging. We actually have solid proof. Wouldn't the argument be the American people need to have these cases resolved before they make their choice in 2024? Wouldn't that be the argument? Because
I'd want to know that too. I would too.
Yes, I would too. But some people disagree. In fact, here, let me go over here to the magic Google box. Some people disagree. This is Senator Lindsey Graham speaking on Fox News, and this is Lindsey's particular take.
Yeah, play this forward. How do you run for president in 2024, moving between courthouses in New York City and Washington, D.C. and Florida and Atlanta?
He's spending more money on lawyer fees than he is running for office. January the 6th, I was there. I saw it. He was impeached over it. The American people can decide whether they want him to be president or not. This should be decided at the ballot box, not in a bunch of liberal jurisdictions trying to put the man in jail. They're weaponizing the law in this country. They're trying to take Donald Trump down, and this is setting a bad precedent. And what I fear is that you're changing the way the game is played in America, and there's no going back.
So he thinks that we need to decide this at the ballot box. Oddly enough, I would argue we did that in 2020. And part of the reason we're in this mess is because one of the dudes decided he didn't like the results. So, okay, Lindsey, I understand, but do you agree?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
But I here's what concerns me too. Let's say that these cases don't get resolved, the federal ones, and they're pending. once the guy gets elected, it feels like that ain't going to move forward. No guy's going to authorize his own Department of Justice to continue to pursue him.
He's already talked about he'll stop him immediately.
But you have these state prosecutions, and it looks like there's federal law that suggests that under some circumstances, you can suck those cases out of state court into the feds. Would they then do that? Could a Donald J. Trump as president of the United States say, you know what, Fanni Willis, I really appreciate you trying to get me. You didn't do it before I got to base, which is to get elected and sworn in. I'm now going to reach out. I don't know if it fits that, but let's say it doesn't. I'm concerned now that what these Democrat DAs, Alvin Bragg, and it's not just limited to Democrats, but Alvin Bragg and Fanni Willis have done is to pull off the wrapper on something that we had never done, and that is to create a local prosecutor environment where you can harass the living hell out of a sitting president. Because if those prosecutions are still pending, I'm not aware of any law that says you can't prosecute a sitting president as a local DA. And that wouldn't make sense either, right? Like, let's pretend the local president travels to Colorado and is somewhere in Aurora and punches someone in the face, right? Commits a crime.
Okay.
There's no chance as DA I'm going to be like, well, you shouldn't have done that, but you're president and you've got a lot of important things to do. I'd say, buckle up, buddy, because you're going to be held accountable for punching someone in the face. Doesn't care if it's Biden, Trump, it doesn't matter, boy, girl, I don't care. So are we now creating an environment, though, where the next step in this, the maturation of this strategy is, if you're a Democrat or a Republican and the opposing party has the White House, you just figure out a way to gin up your local prosecutors or DAs or AGs to prosecute the hell on state charges out of a president so that they can't actually do anything.
I think that in a way we are already seeing that, not on a local level, but on a national level. And the example I will give is the number of times the House Republicans have talked about impeaching Biden. They've talked about impeaching other members of the cabinet, but the issue for me is, now, Mayorkas, I think they could make a case there. The others, not so certain about that, especially one on Biden, is we keep hearing about this impeachment inquiry, and we've got to be moving to impeachment. We've had several times articles of impeachment being introduced in the House, but yet nobody has made the case and provided any shred of proof. You can disagree with the impeachments against Donald Trump. I disagree with the second one because of time. I don't disagree with the first one because he did what they alleged he did. And so I agree that there should have been some mechanism there.
But whether or not it was a high crime or misdemeanor is the issue. It's not whether
here's the thing is everybody talks about, oh my gosh, the Department of Justice is now weaponized. Joe Biden is now using the political process in order to enforce law. When inside the call for Ukraine, when he's talking to Zelensky, he's asking for an investigation against his political opponent. He's not concerned about the result of the investigation. He just wants an investigation.
That's interesting, too,
open.
because that's what we've seen now with, I think, the Biden DOJ and Alvin Bragg and Fanni Willis. If it's Fanni, forgive me, man. Honestly, I've heard it both ways. Do you have any idea, Billy? Is it Fanni?
I don't know. And I would disagree with you on the Biden DOJ. I wouldn't disagree with you on the Alvin Bragg. I think Alvin Bragg is more political. I don't think you can make the argument with the Biden DOJ at this point. I have a hard time with that because there's even some stories inside of Merrick Garland slow walking a certain number of things. And we have a special prosecutor for the Trump issue. We also, after over 100 House representatives back in May requested that Ray be made, that the guy in Delaware be named the special prosecutor. They didn't ask for one, Weiss. They asked for him to be named a special prosecutor. Yeah. A number of senators, including the gentleman we just heard of from Lindsey Graham, also requested Weiss to be made a special prosecutor in that case. They got it, and now all of a sudden it is the mostest egregious example of political cover-up ever. They got what they asked for. They didn't get it right away.
I'm not sure it's the egregious cover-up, but
that's how they described it, though.
Yeah, that doesn't bother me as much. And what bothers me is now the dude's frozen from giving testimony before Congress about what took place in the lead up to the decision to either offer the plea bargain or whatever. Like, I want to know, what conversations did you have with other U.S. attorneys that were like, no, I'm not bringing that here. But we don't get to have that now. I think we're seeing the destruction of the criminal justice system along political lines. And there's going to be people that are out there like, oh, George, it's been destroyed for years. It hasn't.
No,
it hasn't. We're getting there. And we're getting there. And this is what we're going to talk about tomorrow with Charlie Kirk and Citizen Kane. And that is, we're getting there because bad things happen that politicize the process, and our response is, let's do it too.
Yeah.
Like we are killing off our criminal justice system at the federal and the local level. And damn, as a guy who has spent 28 years swimming in those waters, it's scary, but
it is
because we don't have a good fallback. We don't have a good alternative. And we're going to, anyway, we'll talk about this tomorrow. I got to cut away for a break. Now, before I tell you about a guy who's also been swimming in those same waters, a little bit faster, a little bit deeper waters. His name's Dan Caplis. He is a super lawyer, and not because some magazine he paid to put him in there says that, but because his career says that. He's been spending decades getting justice, and the only justice the civil system can get you turns out to be dollars. Dan is in the business of trying to get you as much justice as possible when you're a victim. All you need to get Dan's attention and to get his support as you fight through this insurance company don't want to give you enough because they're in the business of keeping all their own dollars environment is to have a righteous case. Doesn't care your background, doesn't care your ideology, doesn't care about any of that stuff. Cares about, are you a victim of someone else's negligence, recklessness, intentional conduct? Doesn't matter if the perpetrator is an individual or a company or any other sort of business. This is what he does. It's what he and Bobber Wahid have been doing it for 16, 17 years. Dan's been doing it for decades since he left CU Law, go Buffs. Give him a call at 303-770-5551, 303-770-5551. You can also check him out at dancaplis.law.com. That's Caplis, Caplis, law.com. As the texts come in, I'll read one before the break. What is Billy smoking? He'll tell us when we come back. George Brauchler, 710 KNUS. Maybe, George Brauchler right here on 710 KNUS, I can get this piece of orange out of my teeth. I know that sounds like a crazy thing to bring up on the radio. We do reveal everything to you here, but it's a good time to talk about my dentist, Doctors Richter and Snyder at Twin Aspen Dental Center down there off of Parker Road in Stroh, right by Lehman Academy. Beautiful facility and more beautifuler people that work there. Is that, I don't even know if that's a word. Fantastic folks that are down there helping take care of your dental health all the time. They advertise here because they share our values. They're community-based people who are trying to do great community work. They want your great smile to be even greater. They do all the routine dental care stuff, but they also do implants, Invisalign treatment, the caps, the bridges, all the other stuff that you would want to have done. All you have to do is check them out at twinaspendentalcenter.com, twinaspendentalcenter.com, or give them a call at 303-841-7466, 303-841-7466. Folks, I can't take the calls. I can listen to some things, but not with you on the radio. I can read some text, but not to you on the radio. We're just out of time. My thanks to our great guests, Art Acevedo. He's the chief of police for Aurora. We had Dave Migoya with another great and very, very good investigative story from the Gazette about the judicial branch and the lack of financial disclosures. And then, of course, Sadie Gurman, the great justice reporter for the Wall Street Journal, coming in to give us updates on what's going on with the DJT Hunter Biden cases as they work their way through the system. We'll have on Sadie again in the future. Tomorrow, we are going to cover the show that Charlie had on yesterday with a guy named Citizen Kane. If you want to listen to that podcast, do that as well. Thanks to Billy behind the glass. We'll be right back here, 6 to 10 a.m. It'll be Deb at 3, Stefan at 4. Stick around. George Brauchler, 710 KNUS.